In the middle of a blizzard, my father threw my 8-year-old daughter out onto the porch because her cousin lied. He said coldly, "One night out there will teach her a lesson." 3 hours later, the hospital called me. My father rushed to the emergency room too, but stopped dead when he saw me already sitting beside her bed, clutching a thick folder so tightly my knuckles had turned white. I slowly looked up at him and said, "This folder is going to change your life and expose everything you've done to my daughter. I'm truly glad you're here with me today." Before the story continues, drop a quick comment for me. What's the weather like where you are right now? Your perspective might be exactly what someone else needs to read. Just a note. Certain details have been adjusted for storytelling, but what matters most is the message this story carries. My hands left marks on the glass, small pale prints that fogged and vanished in the cold, and on the other side of that door my grandfather watched me freeze. I was 10 years old on December 20th, 2022 at 8:18 p.m., standing barefoot on the front porch in star-pattern pajamas, while a blizzard howled around me at 12 degrees below 0 Celsius. My knuckles were red from knocking. My breath came in short clouds that disappeared into the dark. Through the glass door I could see the living room warm light the couch where I'd sat that morning, the television still glowing with the Weather Channel's blizzard coverage. I knocked again, harder. "Grandpa," I whispered, then louder. "Grandpa, please, I'm cold." The curtain moved. It was a small thing, that movement, 6 inches of fabric sliding to the side, but I saw his face clearly in the gap. Grandpa Vernon standing 3 feet from the door, looking directly at me. Not through me, not past me. At me. His eyes met mine for 7 seconds. I know because I counted later in therapy when I was trying to explain what it feels like to watch someone choose your death. He saw my face turning blue. He saw the ice forming in my hair. He saw my bare feet on the concrete porch and my hands pressed against the glass like I was trying to push through to warmth. And then the curtain fell. The living room lights clicked off 20 seconds later. I heard his footsteps, heavy, deliberate, walking away from the door. Not toward it. Away. The house went dark. I stood there in the blizzard thinking he'd come back. That this was a lesson about patience, about waiting quietly like he'd taught me. That any second the lock would turn and Grandma Marlene would pull me inside, scolding but warm. But you need to understand how I got there. How a child ends up outside her own family's door with no one coming to open it. 23 months earlier, in January 2021, I sat in the passenger seat of my mother's Honda Civic, watching gray Colorado highway stretch toward Lakewood. I was 8 years old. Then too, 51 pounds, brown hair always tangled, because I never sat still long enough for proper braiding. Mom had explained it 3 times that week. The California wildfire investigation would take months, possibly 6, and she couldn't take me to a site with air quality warnings and temporary housing. "Your grandparents love you," she said, glancing at me while she drove. "Grandpa Vernon raised me. He's strict, but he's fair." My mother, Saskia Mercer, was 34 that January, an insurance investigator for Guardian Mutual who documented everything: weather patterns, structural damage, human error, with the kind of precision that built ironclad cases. She wore her dark hair in a bun so tight it gave her headaches, and she never left the house without backup documentation of whatever she might need. That day, she tucked a laminated emergency contact card into my backpack's inner pocket, the one I never used. "This card has my direct line," she said, voice careful. "If you ever can't reach me, show someone this card, police, teacher, anyone, okay?" I touched the backpack at my feet. "What if Grandma and Grandpa don't let me call?" "They will, baby. They love you. I'll call every week." I was 8 years old. I believed every adult who said they loved me. The house appeared exactly as I'd remembered from summer visits: modest ranch-style beige siding, snow-dusted lawn, with a birch tree in the front corner. Mom pulled into the driveway at 4:47 p.m. and the front door opened before we'd even unbuckled. Grandpa Vernon stood on the porch in khaki slacks and a navy sweater, 63 years old, retired postal supervisor, the kind of man who had rules for everything, where to sit, when to speak, who mattered in his house. His hair was silver gray, combed with military precision. His posture was straight as the flagpole he'd installed in the front yard. "There's my girls," he called smile-wide. "Come in before you catch cold." Mom grabbed my suitcase from the trunk. I walked up the path slowly, watching his face. The smile reached his mouth but stopped there. His eyes, pale blue, the same as Mom's, stayed flat and measuring. "Thanks for doing this, Dad?" Mom said, setting the suitcase down to hug him. "I know it's a lot." "Family takes care of family," Vernon said, and then his hand settled on my shoulder. His fingers pressed down, not hard enough that Mom would notice, not gentle enough to be comfort. Just firm enough to feel like instruction, like a claim. I looked up at his face. The smile hadn't moved. The eyes hadn't warmed. "Hi, Grandpa," I managed. "Hello, Ren. We're going to have a good time together, aren't we?" It wasn't a question. Mom was already walking through the door, pulling my suitcase behind her, calling back about where I should sleep and what time my bedtime was. Normal things. Parent things. She didn't see the way his grip tightened for half a second before releasing me. Didn't see the way he looked at me like I was a problem he was calculating how to solve. Vernon's hand rested on my shoulder as Mom carried my suitcase inside, and his fingers pressed just hard enough to feel like a warning. I looked up at his face, the smile, the cold eyes, and some part of me, the part that would later survive, whispered, "Remember this moment." But Mom was already walking through the door, and I followed because I didn't know yet that some thresholds change you. The house smelled like lemon furniture polish, and something underneath it, something stale that no amount of cleaning could cover, and I knew within 30 seconds that I didn't belong there. Grandma Marlene emerged from the kitchen, wiping her hands on a floral apron, 60 years old, with soft hands and a softer voice that never rose when Grandpa Vernon made decisions. Her gray hair was permed into careful waves, and she wore a cardigan despite the house being warm enough that I'd already taken off my jacket. "Saskia, honey, you look thin," she said, hugging my mother. "I'll make dinner, and this must be little Wren." She touched my shoulder, lighter than Vernon's grip, but just as distant. Like petting a neighbor's dog. Polite, temporary. "Hi, Grandma," I said. "You've grown," she said, which wasn't true. I'd been the same height since summer. Footsteps thudded down the hallway, and a boy appeared, 10 years old, wearing a Rockies t-shirt, and confidence that came from knowing exactly where he stood in this house. Beckett Dalton. My cousin had a bedroom at Grandpa Vernon's house with baseball posters and a rocket nightlight. I knew this because Aunt Leora had mentioned it during last Thanksgiving, the pride in her voice making it clear her son's permanence was an achievement. "I'm Beckett," he said, looking at me the way kids assess new classmates. "I stay here a lot. Like all the time, basically." "This is Wren," Mom said. "You two will have fun together." Beckett shrugged. Vernon stepped past us into the living room, gesturing like a tour guide. "Let's get you girls settled," he said. "Beckett, show your cousin around." Beckett led me down the hallway with the authority of someone who knew where the good snacks were kept and which floorboards creaked. He pushed open a door on the left. "This is my room," he said, flipping on the light. It was a real room. Baseball posters covered 3 walls. Rockies, Yankees, some player I didn't recognize mid-swing. The rocket nightlight sat on a nightstand next to a real bed with a navy comforter. Shelves held action figures, a rock collection, board games, still in their boxes. Thick curtains blocked the winter afternoon light. Everything in the room said, "This person lives here." "Grandpa got me this whole shelf last Christmas," Beckett said, pointing to a bookcase stuffed with baseball cards in protective sleeves. "I keep my collection here. It's worth like $200. "Cool," I said, because that's what you say. Marlene appeared behind us, touching my shoulder again with those soft hands. "Come on, sweetie," she said. "Let me show you where you'll sleep." The spare room was at the end of the hall across from a bathroom that smelled like bleach. Marlene opened the door and I saw a pull-out couch, with a folded blanket on top, thin curtains that let in gray light, bare walls the color of old teeth. A cardboard box sat on the floor near the closet. "It's just temporary, sweetie," Marlene said, that soft voice making promises that weren't promises. "We didn't want to move too much around since you're only here a little while." She walked to the closet and opened it, half full of storage bins, Christmas decorations, things that mattered more than making space for me. "You can put your clothes in this box for now," she said, tapping the cardboard with her shoe. "The couch pulls out. It's actually very comfortable for temporary arrangements." There was that word again. Temporary. You need to understand something about the word temporary. When adults use it about a child, they're really saying doesn't count. Mom appeared in the doorway with my suitcase, taking in the room with the same assessment skills she used on structural damage. I saw something flicker in her expression. Doubt. Maybe guilt. But Vernon was already behind her, filling the doorframe. "Saskia, you've got a long drive," he said, checking his watch. "Traffic on I-70 gets bad after dark." "Right," Mom said. She set the suitcase down and knelt to my height, hands on my shoulders. "Remember, you call me every week, and if anything feels wrong, you use that card." "Okay," I nodded. My throat felt tight. "How long is a few months?" I asked. "Probably until summer," she said. "Maybe June. I'll know more once I get to the site." June was 5 months away. I was 8. 5 months was half a school year. Forever. "Okay," I whispered. She hugged me tightly enough that I could smell her shampoo, coconut, the same brand she'd used my whole life, and then she stood up, smoothing her jeans, not meeting my eyes. "Thanks again, Dad," she said to Vernon. "I'll call this weekend to check in." Vernon nodded. Marlene walked them toward the front door, saying something about safe travels and how I'd be just fine. Beckett had disappeared back to his room. I stood in the spare room doorway watching my mother pull on her coat, hug Marlene, shake Vernon's hand. She looked back once, waved, smiled the way people smile when they're relieved to be leaving. The sound of my mother's car pulling away is the last thing I remember feeling safe. I unpacked slowly, putting folded clothes into the cardboard box, setting my toothbrush in the bathroom we'd apparently share. Marlene called me for dinner at 6-pot roast potatoes, green beans that tasted like the can they came from. Vernon asked Beckett about school. Beckett talked about his math grade, his gym class dodgeball tournament, his upcoming science fair project. No one asked me anything. After dinner, I went back to the spare room and pulled out the couch bed. The mattress was thin and smelled faintly of mothballs. I found my school backpack and dug through it, homework folder, pencil case, the emergency contact card Mom had tucked into the inside pocket. Under the math worksheets, I found my sketch pad and the box of colored pencils I'd gotten for my birthday. I sat on the pull-out couch and opened to a blank page. I didn't plan what to draw. My hand just moved brown crayon for the outline, a rectangle, 4 corners, a door. But when I went to add the handle, my hand stopped. I looked at it. A door. No handle on the inside. Just a blank rectangle. I drew a small stick figure on the left side, standing where I was sitting, trapped on the wrong side. "Why doesn't it have a handle?" I whispered to myself. I held up the drawing to the lamp. A door drawn in brown crayon, 4 corners, no handle on my side. Just a blank rectangle with a small stick figure standing where I was sitting. I didn't know why I'd drawn it, but I kept it, tucked it under the pull-out mattress where no one would find it. The first video call happened exactly 7 days after my mother left, and I practiced what I would say for 6 of them, but when her face appeared on the screen, Grandma Marlene's hand landed on my shoulder and every word I'd rehearsed disappeared. Sunday morning, February. The laptop sat open on the kitchen table, positioned, so the camera caught me in perfect light. Marlene had spent 10 minutes adjusting the angle, moving the salt shaker, tilting the screen. She stood directly behind my chair, one hand resting on the wooden back, the other on my shoulder. "Better angle this way," she'd said. "And the Wi-Fi is strongest in the kitchen." Mom's face filled the screen at exactly 10 a.m., her hotel room visible behind her beige walls. Generic landscape print, the kind of temporary housing that came with disaster sites. Hey, baby. Her smile was so big it made my chest hurt. I miss you so much. Tell me about your week. Did you make any new friends at school? I opened my mouth. Marlene's fingers tightened slightly on my shoulder. It's fine, I said. School's fine. Fine. What does fine mean? What did you do? Did you eat lunch with anyone? How's your teacher? I glanced up. Marlene smiled down at me, nodding encouragement. Good, I said. Everything's good. Mom's smile dimmed a fraction. Can you tell me about your classroom? Do you have homework? Some homework. Math. Marlene leaned slightly into frame, her voice warm and reassuring. She's adjusting beautifully, Saskia. Just needs time, you know how kids are. New routine, new school. Give her a few weeks. Mom nodded, but something in her expression shifted, the same look she got reviewing insurance claims that didn't add up. Okay, she said slowly. Ren, baby, what's your favorite part of the day there? I looked up again, seeking the answer in Marlene's face. Dinner, I said, because that seemed safe. Grandma makes good dinner. Marlene squeezed my shoulder. She's such a sweet girl. Vernon adores having her here. The call lasted 18 minutes. I spoke maybe 30 words total. Here's what 8-year-olds do on video calls with parents. They trust, they talk over each other, show drawings, complain about homework, ask when you're coming home. I did none of those things. The second Sunday call followed the same pattern. Marlene positioned me in the kitchen again. Best lighting, honey, and I'm making lunch anyway, and stood behind me through the entire 20-minute conversation. Mom asked about school. I said fine. Mom asked about my room. I said okay. Mom asked if I wanted to show her anything I'd drawn. I started to stand to run, get my sketch pad, but Marlene's hand pressed down. Oh, she hasn't been drawing much, Marlene said. Too busy with schoolwork and playing outside with Beckett. Isn't that right, Ren? Yes, I whispered. By the third Sunday call in late February, I'd learned the script. Mom asked questions. I answered in single words while checking Marlene's face for approval. Grandma filled the silences with reassurances about adjustment and normalcy and how well I was eating. Can I talk to Ren alone for a minute? Mom asked during that third call, her voice careful. Just us. Marlene laughed lightly. Oh, honey, the Wi-Fi router is right here in the kitchen. Signal drops everywhere else. You don't want a choppy connection, do you? Last thing we need is the call cutting out. Right, Mom said. Of course. The fourth Sunday call in early March lasted 11 minutes. I answered every question with a single word. Fine. Good. Okay. Yes. No. My voice got smaller each time until Mom had to ask me to speak up twice. I'm fine, Mom. I said at the end, the words feeling rehearsed because they were. Really? After the call disconnected, Marlene patted my head. See, that wasn't so hard. Your mother worries too much. No need to upset her with complaints, right? I hadn't complained about anything, but I nodded anyway. My mother watched those recordings the way she examined cracked foundations, looking for the moment the structure began to fail. Mid-March, alone in her California hotel room, Mom sat at the small desk with her laptop open and 4 video files queued up. I know this because she told me later in the hospital when she explained how she'd known something was wrong. She watched the first call from February, taking notes on a legal pad. Then the second. Then the third. Then she opened them all in separate windows, arranging them side by side on her screen. Week 1, I sat straighter, made eye contact with the camera, spoke in full sentences even if they were short. Week 4, hunched shoulders, hands hidden in my lap, eyes that flicked up and to the left before every answer, seeking permission from someone off camera. Subject exhibits classic signs of monitored communication, she said to the empty hotel room, her voice falling into the professional tone she used during depositions. Delayed responses, reduced vocabulary, permission-seeking eye movement. She rewound the week 4 footage frame by frame. There, she whispered, pausing on my face. She looks up before every answer. She's checking approval. She played all 4 calls again this time, listening instead of watching. Counting the number of times Marlene interrupted. Tracking how my word count decreased while Marlene's increased. Noting the excuses for staying in frame, better lighting, stronger Wi-Fi making lunch. What the hell is happening in that house? She said, but she already knew the answer. She just didn't want to believe it yet. She pulled out her professional incident notebook, the black hardcover moleskin she used for disaster site documentation, the one where she cataloged structural damage witness statements, photographic evidence. It had gone with her to warehouse fires and hurricane damage sites. She'd filled 3 of them documenting the California wildfire investigation. She opened to a blank page, wrote the date at the top, March 14th, 2021, and underneath in careful print Wren, observations. First entry 4, video calls all monitored. Marlene Mercer present 100% of duration despite requests for privacy. Second entry, subject's verbal engagement decreased 73% from week 1 baseline. Full sentences to single words. Third entry, subject demonstrates approval-seeking behavior, upward glance pattern before 89% of responses. Fourth entry, change in posture, eye contact, confidence. Visible deterioration in 4 weeks. She stared at the page. This was the notebook she used for buildings that were about to fall. Why was she using it for her daughter? What am I documenting? She whispered to the empty room. What am I afraid I'm going to find? She wrote 4 more lines that night, each one a question she didn't have answers to yet. The last entry was the one that kept her awake. Why won't they let her talk to me alone? She underlined it twice. Within a month, she'd fill 6 pages. Ms. Thornton found me on a Tuesday in April, sitting in the cafeteria corner, where the fluorescent light had burned out. I'd chosen that spot because nobody looked into dark corners, and I'd gotten very good at not being seen. She'd been watching me for 3 weeks. Ms. Celeste Thornton, 44, the school counselor with the soft office and the shelves of markers, never interrupted when I drew. She told me later that she'd counted 15 consecutive days, same corner table, same slumped posture, same methodical eating, followed by staring at nothing until the bell rang. The cafeteria was loud that Tuesday, second graders trading chocolate milk, arguing over 4 square forming recess alliances. I sat in my corner with a peanut butter sandwich, eyes on the table. 15 days, she said quietly to herself near the lunch line. Same corner, not a single friend. She walked over slowly, not rushing. She wore a cardigan with pockets and comfortable shoes. Hi, Wren, she said, standing a respectful distance away. I'm Ms. Thornton, the school counselor. Would you like to have lunch in my office sometime? I have colored pencils. I looked up quickly, fear spiking. I'm not in trouble. My voice came out smaller than I meant it to. No, she said gently. Not even a little. I just noticed you might like a quieter place to eat. She waited. I searched her face for the trick, the trap. Okay, I whispered. Today, I nodded. Her office was nothing like Principal Morrison's hard chairs and loud clock. Ms. Thornton's space had warm lamps instead of fluorescent beanbag chairs and an entire wall of art supplies in clear plastic bins. Markers, colored pencils, construction paper, paint. She gestured to a small table near the window. You can eat here if you want, or sit wherever feels comfortable. I sat at the table, set down my lunch bag, didn't touch the food. Ms. Thornton settled at her desk, opened a folder, started writing. After 2 minutes of silence, she spoke without looking up. You can draw anything or nothing. You can just sit. Whatever feels right. I stared at the bins of supplies, at the blank paper stacked in a tray, at the colored pencils, not the cheap classroom kind, but the kind that actually made the colors you wanted. I stood slowly, walked to the supplies, picked up brown and gray pencils, took 3 sheets of paper back to the table. And I drew. A door, 4 corners, no handle on the inside, a small figure standing on the wrong side. You need to understand what it means when a child stops talking, not because they can't, but because they've learned their words don't matter. I drew for 40 minutes while Miss Thornton did paperwork, the only sounds her pen scratching and my pencil moving. When the bell rang, I'd filled all 3 sheets. "Can I come back?" I whispered. She looked at me at the drawings I'd created. "Every Tuesday," she said, writing my name in her planner. "Same time. This is your spot now." The ritual established itself quickly. Every Tuesday at 11:45, I'd leave the cafeteria and walk to Ms. Thornton's office. She'd have paper and pencils ready. I'd draw. She'd work quietly. Sometimes 40 minutes would pass without either of us speaking. I produced 2 or 3 drawings each session. She'd date them in the corner with neat handwriting: April 20th, 2021, April 27th, 2021, May 4th, 2021, then photograph each one before sliding the originals into a manila folder labeled with my name. "Do you want to tell me about this one?" she asked during the 3rd week, holding up a drawing of a window with curtains pulled shut. I shook my head. "Not with words," I said. "Okay," she said simply, and filed it with the others. By the 4th week, I started asking for specific colors. "Do you have blue?" I said one Tuesday. "Dark blue." She brought me 3 shades. I chose the darkest one and drew a door, a window, and a tiny figure looking out at falling snow. Every Tuesday, I drew maps to a place I couldn't describe, and Ms. Thornton collected them like someone gathering evidence for a trial that hadn't started yet. Late May, after school hours, Celeste Thornton spread 6 weeks of drawings across her desk and started cataloging patterns. I know this because she showed me the notes years later when I was old enough to understand what she'd been trying to prevent. She made a list. Doors 11 occurrences out of 14 drawings. Windows 9 occurrences. Curtains 7 occurrences. Small footprints outside structures 5 occurrences. Repeating figures same size, same position outside or separated in 12 drawings. She picked up the drawing from May 25th, a warm Tuesday, 72 degrees, when kids had eaten lunch on the playground. In that drawing, I'd created a small figure in star pattern pajamas standing outside a closed door while geometric snowflakes fell around her. May 25th, 2021. She wrote on a sticky note, "Snow imagery despite spring weather. Pattern barriers, separation winter. She's telling me something." What? She photographed the May drawing separately, zooming in on the carefully drawn snowflakes. Each one had 6 points. Each one was different. An 8-year-old had spent focused time in late spring rendering winter with careful detail. She opened her email, started a draft to my mother. "Dear Ms. Mercer, I'm the school counselor at Lakewood Ridge Elementary. I wanted to reach out regarding some patterns I've noticed." She stopped, read it again, deleted it. What would she say? "Your daughter draws snow in May. Your daughter won't speak but creates visual documentation of doors she can't open." She saved the email as a draft, filed the drawing with the others, opened her session notes, and wrote one line. "Ren M. Pattern escalation. Monitoring for behavioral changes. Consider parent contact if themes intensify." Celeste held the May drawing up to her desk lamp. The small figure, the closed door, the carefully drawn snowflakes that had no business being there in spring. She opened her email to draft a message to Saskia Mercer, then stopped. What would she say? She saved the email as draft, filed the drawing with the others, and wrote one line in her session notes: "Monitoring for escalation." The dish broke at 6:47 on a Tuesday in June, and before the last piece stopped spinning on the kitchen floor, Beckett was already pointing at me. He'd been bouncing a foam ball off the kitchen walls while Grandma Marlene cooked dinner, something he did constantly, something I'd been told never to do. The ball ricocheted off the cabinet. He lunged for it. His shoulder hit the counter edge, and the ceramic serving dish that had been sitting too close to the edge tumbled off and shattered across the linoleum. I was at the sink washing my hands, 6 feet away, not involved. But Beckett's eyes met mine for half a second, and I saw the calculation happen. "Grandpa!" He shouted toward the living room, his voice instantly tearful in that practiced way. Ren pushed me, I didn't mean to. She made me hit the counter. I froze, soap still on my hands, brain trying to catch up to what had just happened. Vernon appeared in the kitchen doorway within 3 seconds, moving faster than I'd ever seen him move. Behind him, Aunt Leora emerged from the dining room where she'd been setting the table. Aunt Leora, 40. My mother's older sister had married Marcus Dalton at 21 and moved exactly 10 minutes from our grandparents, close enough to control everything. I started, but Vernon was already looking at the broken dish, then at Beckett, then at me. I was at the sink, I said, holding up my wet hands as proof. I wasn't even near him. Beckett's lower lip trembled. She pushed me, Grandpa. She's always doing stuff when you're not looking. Marlene stood at the stove, wooden spoon in hand, mouth open but silent. Did you push your cousin? Vernon asked, his voice flat, already certain. No, I said. He was throwing the ball and he hit the counter himself. I was washing. Do not lie to me, Vernon said. Leora moved to Beckett's side, her hand immediately going to his hair, smoothing it down in that possessive way she had. It's okay, honey, she murmured to him. Accidents happen. Vernon looked at the broken pieces, at Beckett's fake tearful face, at me, standing there, dripping sink water onto the floor. Beckett doesn't lie, he said, and the words had the weight of scripture. If he says you pushed him, you pushed him. Here's what happens to children when you tell them their truth doesn't matter. They stop offering it, and then they stop remembering they ever had one. But I tried again. Vernon held up one hand, silencing me like you'd silence a barking dog. I said, do not argue. Do not contradict your cousin. Do not make this worse with lies. He pointed toward the hallway. Go to your room until you can behave. But I didn't. Now, Leora stroked Beckett's hair, her voice syrup sweet. It's okay, honey. Some kids just don't know how to be careful around others. You were just playing. I looked at Marlene, desperate, but she'd turned back to the stove, stirring something that didn't need stirring. I walked to the spare room on legs that felt disconnected from my body. Behind me, I heard Leora comforting Beckett and Vernon, telling Marlene to get the broom. No one was discussing what actually happened. The story was already decided. In the spare room, I sat on the pull-out couch and tried to understand what had just occurred. This wasn't the first time Beckett had blamed me for something. There'd been smaller incidents, a spilled juice cup, a torn homework page, a missing toy that turned up under his bed 3 days later. But this was the first time the rule had been stated so explicitly. Beckett doesn't lie, which meant I do. Which meant my version doesn't count. Which meant truth is whatever he says it is. I sat very still, hands in my lap, and thought about the way he'd looked at me right before he started shouting. He'd known I'd know he was lying. He'd wanted me to know. That was part of it, not just getting away with breaking the dish, but making sure I understood that he could say anything and be believed. I was 8 years old, and I'd just learned that some mouths eat words and some mouths eat children, and in that house, they were the same thing. That night, I learned the architecture of silencing. It's not loud, it's simply a rule: your words don't count. If I can't say true things, I thought, what can I say? They didn't call me for dinner. I heard them eating in the dining room, the scrape of forks, low conversation, Beckett's voice telling some story that made Vernon laugh. At 8:30, Marlene brought me a plate with cold chicken and congealed mashed potatoes, set it on the desk without making eye contact, and left. I didn't eat. Instead, I pulled my backpack from under the pull-out couch and found my drawing supplies, the ones I'd been keeping for school, for Ms. Thornton's office, where someone paid attention. But tonight, I needed them here. I took out a red marker, the thick kind, and a blank sheet of paper. I drew an enormous mouth taking up 3/4 of the page. Sharp triangular teeth, dozens of them pointing inward. A black void inside where the throat should be. The mouth was open wide, gaping, ready to swallow. At the very bottom of the page, I drew a tiny stick figure, my size, my proportions, and over the place where the mouth should be, on the small figure, I drew a large red X, crossed out, gone. I drew what I couldn't say, that they were eating my voice one word at a time. I stared at the finished drawing, holding it up to the lamp. The mouth was so much bigger than me. The teeth were sharp enough to cut. The tiny figure at the bottom looked like it was about to be swallowed whole. "I won't draw here anymore," I whispered to the empty room. "Only at Miss Thornton's." I held up the drawing, the gaping red mouth with teeth like knives, and at the bottom so small you'd almost miss it, a figure with an X where her voice should be. I folded it carefully and tucked it under the mattress with the door drawing. 2 pieces of evidence, 2 maps of the same trap. I wouldn't draw at the house again, only at school, only in Ms. Thornton's office, only where someone might see and understand. I discovered the 2-hour discrepancy on a Tuesday night in September while sitting in a La Quinta Inn outside Dallas reviewing my daughter's school portal, the way I reviewed damage assessments, methodically looking for cracks. The storm damage site had been brutal that day, 12 hours cataloging wind shear patterns and compromised roof structures in 90-degree heat. I'd gotten back to the hotel at 8:30, showered, ordered Thai food from the place down the street, and opened my laptop to do what I did every Tuesday: check Ren's school portal. It was routine. Lakewood Ridge Elementary's parent portal updated daily with attendance grades, teacher comments, lunch account balances. I logged in with my password, Ren's birthday, plus the year I'd graduated college, and clicked through the familiar tabs. Attendance perfect as always. My daughter never missed school. Grades satisfactory across the board. Second grade didn't have letter grades yet, but the check marks indicated she was meeting expectations. Teacher comments generic and brief. Quiet student. Completes work on time. Follows directions. I clicked on the extended day program tab, expecting to see the standard 3:30 pickup time, same as I'd arranged for when I'd enrolled her. My father had agreed to pick her up after school, just like he did with Beckett. "Wait," I said aloud to the empty hotel room. "Pickup time, 5:30 p.m. to 6 p.m. extended day program." I scrolled down. The log showed daily entries: September 20th, extended day, 5:45 p.m. pickup. September 19th, extended day, 5:52 p.m. pickup. September 16th, extended day, 6:03 p.m. pickup. Extended care until when? I whispered, refreshing the page like it might correct itself. I scrolled back through the calendar. September, late August, mid-August. Every single day, extended day program pickup between 5:30 and 6 p.m. Every day she's in extended care, every single day. My heart started doing what it did when I found load-bearing walls with hidden cracks, that professional alarm that something structural was wrong. I opened a new tab and navigated to Beckett's student page. My parents were listed as emergency contacts for both kids, which meant I had portal access to my nephew's records, 2 standard family account linking. Beckett Dalton, grade 4. Pickup method, parent Carline. Pickup time, 3:15 p.m. I clicked through his daily logs. September 20th. Parent pickup, 3:12 p.m. September 19th. Parent pickup, 3:17 p.m. September 16th. Parent pickup, 3:14 p.m. Every single day Vernon picked up Beckett at 3:15 in the parent car line. Every single day Ren stayed in extended care until almost 6. 2 hours, 2 hours every day. When you're trained to assess structural damage, you learn to see patterns: the way weight distributes, where pressure concentrates, which cracks matter, and which are cosmetic. I was seeing those patterns in my daughter's life, and they all pointed to failure. I went back 8 weeks, checking every school day since the year had started. Not one exception. Not one day where Ren got picked up early or Beckett stayed late. Not one day where they were treated the same. "This isn't circumstantial," I said, my voice taking on the flat tone I used during depositions. "This is policy." I pulled my professional incident notebook from my bag, the black one I'd started in March with the Ren Observations heading. I'd filled 6 pages since then. Video call monitoring, monosyllabic responses, Marlene's constant presence. But this was different. This was data. This was documented, time-stamped institutional proof. I opened Excel and created a new workbook, titled it Ren Evidence Matrix. The same naming convention I used for disaster site documentation. I created column headers across the top: date, data point, source, pattern type, severity, notes, action items. The cursor blinked in cell A2 waiting. Date, source, discrepancy, pattern, severity. I muttered, typing. First row, August 23rd, 2021. School pickup disparity. Source, Lakewood Ridge Parent Portal. Pattern, daily systematic favoritism. Severity high, demonstrates unequal treatment, emotional neglect. I stared at the words I just typed. This was the template I used for buildings that were failing. What did it mean that I was using it for my daughter's living situation? Evidence matrices don't have feelings, they just have facts. And facts don't care if you're ready to accept what they're showing you. I kept typing. Second row, February to March 2021. Video call supervision. Source, saved recordings, personal observation. Pattern, grandmother present 100% of calls despite multiple requests for privacy. Severity high indicates communication control. Third row, March to April 2021. Verbal regression. Source, video recordings. Comparison, word count analysis. Pattern, declining engagement. Monosyllabic responses increasing over time. Severity, critical psychological withdrawal. Fourth row, January to ongoing. Temporary language. Source, personal observation, grandmother's repeated statements. Pattern, emotional distancing, impermanence messaging. Severity, moderate, undermines sense of belonging. I paused, opened the school portal again, clicked through the staff directory, found the counseling office. Ms. Celeste Thornton, school counselor. I went back to Ren's student page, checked the notes section. There it was, buried in the activities log, weekly counseling session Tuesdays, 11:45 to 12:25. Fifth row, April to ongoing. Weekly counseling sessions. Source, school portal activities log. Pattern, school staff identified need for intervention. Severity, critical institutional recognition of distress. I saved the file, backed it up to cloud storage, backed it up again to an external drive. 5 rows, 5 data points, 5 cracks in the foundation. I leaned back in the hotel desk chair, staring at the spreadsheet glowing on my screen. Outside, Dallas traffic hummed on the highway. Inside, the air conditioner cycled on with a mechanical click. When I document buildings, I whispered to the empty room, I'm looking for structural failure before collapse. What am I looking at here? I knew the answer. I'd known it since March, maybe earlier. But now I had proof. Now I had data. Evidence doesn't lie, I said quietly. People do. Data tells the truth. I stared at those 5 rows, 5 small data points that would grow to 50, then 70, then, eventually, the full case file that would end everything. But that night, I only had 5, and 5 was enough to know I wasn't documenting a family disagreement. I was documenting harm. The cursor blinked at row 6, empty, waiting. The drawing that would become Evidence Exhibit C in the CPS file was created on October 15th, 2021, with a brown Crayola marker and 3 shades of blue in 42 minutes of complete silence. Ms. Thornton had the paper ready when I arrived for my Tuesday session, along with the full bin of markers. I went straight for brown, always brown, for doors, and selected 3 blues from the collection. Light blue for base snow, medium blue for shadows, dark blue for the parts that hurt to draw. I started with the door frame. Vertical rectangle, precise edges, the way doors actually looked when you were 8, and standing in front of them hoping they'd open. I added texture lines to indicate glass because it was a glass door, the kind you could see through, the kind where someone on the other side could see you perfectly. No handle on my side. I left that space blank, smooth, because that was accurate. Ms. Thornton sat at her desk doing paperwork, but I could feel her watching. She always watched, quiet and careful, never interrupting. I switched to light blue and began drawing the ground outside the door. Snow. Not falling yet, just there on the ground, because that's where you stood when the door wouldn't open. I drew 6 small boot prints, child-sized my size, leading up to the door and stopping. Then I drew the handprints. 2 hands pressed flat against the glass from the outside at the height where my hands would reach. I used medium blue for the outline and darker blue for the shadow they'd make against the glass. That door doesn't have a handle on your side, does it? Ms. Thornton said softly after 30 minutes of silence. I didn't look up from the diagonal lines I was drawing for falling snow. You can't open it from inside, I said. Only from outside. I heard her pen stop moving. Have you been locked outside, Wren? I paused, marker hovering over the paper. The question was direct in a way adults usually weren't. I looked at the handprints I'd drawn. Can I use darker blue for the handprints? I asked. She handed me the darkest blue from the bin without another word. Children who can't speak their truth learn to draw it, and if you know how to read those drawings, they'll tell you everything the adults in the room are trying to hide. After I left for 5th period, Ms. Thornton photographed the drawing with her phone, making sure the image was clear enough to see every detail. She opened her session log and wrote, October 15th, 2021. Child depicts locked door exterior. Footprints, handprints on glass from outside snow context. Direct verbal confirmation of lockout when asked. Escalation. She stared at the word escalation for 10 seconds, then opened her email. To Saskia.Mercer@guardianmutual.com. Subject Wren's artwork, October 15th, please call. Ms. Mercer, please review Wren's artwork from today's session. I'm concerned about what she may be trying to communicate. Available to discuss. Celeste Thornton, school counselor. She attached the photo and hit send at 1:15 p.m. This isn't symbolic, she said to her empty office. This is reportage. She picked up her desk phone, finger hovering over the buttons to call Child Protective Services, then set it down. Her mother needs to know first, she whispered. Give her 6 hours. My mother opened that email at 7:30 p.m. Mountain Time, sitting in a temporary field office after 12 hours of cataloging foundation cracks in a building damaged by subsidence. She'd checked her email twice that day already, but Celeste's message had come in between sweeps. She clicked the attachment. The image loaded slowly on the satellite internet connection top to bottom, the brown door frame appearing first, then the glass, then the empty space where a handle should be, then the blue footprints and handprints, then the falling snow. Oh my God, she said aloud to the empty trailer. Oh my God, that's not a metaphor. She zoomed in on the handprints. The size was right. Child hands, 8-year-old hands, Wren's hands. The placement was exact the height a child would reach when standing on a porch, trying to get someone's attention through glass. She zoomed in on the footprints. 6 prints leading to the door. Boot-sized, child boot-sized, Colorado winter detail. She was outside, my mother said, standing up from the folding chair so fast it tipped backward. She was locked outside and she put her hands on the glass. The moment you realize your child has been documenting abuse in colored pencil is the moment you stop being a worried parent and become something colder, sharper, someone who builds cases. When, she said, pacing the small trailer. How many times? How did I not? She stopped, opened her laptop, pulled up the evidence matrix file. She dialed the school's main number at 7:43 p.m., got the after-hours voicemail, left a message with her cell number marked urgent. 2 minutes later, her phone rang. This is Celeste Thornton, the counselor said. I'm still at school. I was hoping you'd call. How many times has she drawn doors? My mother asked, no greeting, no preamble. Specifically doors. She heard papers shuffling. 11 drawings with doors, Celeste said. Almost always no handle on the interior side. The doors don't open from her side. And windows, curtains, things that separate inside from outside. 9 windows, 7 curtains, 5 show footprints outside structures. Timeline, February through October. Pattern's been escalating. My mother's voice shook when she asked the next question. Are these memories or fears? Celeste was quiet for 3 seconds. I think they're records, she said finally. Send me everything, my mother said. Every drawing, every date. I need the full archive by tomorrow morning. I'll scan them tonight. Celeste said. Ms. Mercer. Call me Saskia. Saskia, I should have contacted you sooner. I was trying to respect therapeutic boundaries, but you're contacting me now, my mother interrupted. That's what matters. Send everything. She hung up and opened the evidence matrix, typed into row 6. Date, October 15th, 2021. Data point drawing evidence locked outside incident S handprints on glass from exterior footprints in snow. Source school counselor documentation. Pattern historical documentation through art. Severity. Critical child recording abuse she cannot verbalize. She saved the file, backed it up twice. I sat in that field office until midnight waiting for Celeste's email with the full drawing archive. When it came 18 scanned images, February through October, each one dated and photographed, I opened every file and laid them out in chronological order on my laptop screen. 11 doors, 9 windows, 7 curtains. And in the last 3 drawings, all from September and October footprints. Small footprints. Outside. My sister called me on a Wednesday in November, the first time in 11 months, and within 6 minutes she used the word guardianship. And that's when I knew they'd been planning this all along. I was in a temporary field office outside Sacramento reviewing burn patterns from October's wildfire when my phone buzzed with a name I hadn't seen since January: Leora Dalton. I stared at it for 2 rings, debating whether to answer. Leora, I said, picking up. This is unexpected. Is something wrong with Ren? Saskia, hey? Her voice had that warm, concerned tone I remembered from childhood, the one she used when she wanted something. It's been too long. How's the work going out there? Fine, I said flatly. What's wrong? No, nothing's wrong. That's actually... Well, that's kind of why I'm calling. Just to check in, sister to sister. I set down my pen and pulled the laptop closer, opening a blank document to take notes. When someone shows up after months of silence claiming nothing's wrong, something is always wrong. Okay, I said. Check in about what? Well, about Ren, obviously, and how things are going with Mom and Dad. They're doing great, by the way. Dad's been really enjoying having someone to pick up from school again, and Mom's teaching Ren to bake. She's fine, just fine. 2 fines in 1 sentence. I typed November 17th, 3:21 p.m. Leora calls unprompted. Claims Ren, fine. Good to hear, I said. But that doesn't explain why you're calling for the first time since January. A pause. When Leora spoke again, the warmth had a slight edge. I guess I'm calling because we, and by we I mean the family, Mom and Dad and I, we've been talking and we wanted to touch base with you about how Ren's really doing. I talk to her every Sunday. I said, though, that wasn't quite true anymore. The last 3 calls Ren had barely spoken and Marlene had filled every silence. Right, but Saskia, the thing is... Leora took a breath. She just hasn't settled in. You know, still acts like a guest instead of family. Beckett's completely at home there, but Ren, she's just not thriving. I typed not thriving, manufactured narrative. What specifically do you mean by not thriving? I asked, voice carefully neutral. Her grades are fine. Attendance is perfect. Her teachers' comments are positive. It's not academic, Saskia. It's emotional. She doesn't play with other kids. She eats lunch alone. She doesn't seem happy. The school counselor's been seeing her every week. Did you know that? I did know. I'd been emailing with Celeste Thornton for 3 weeks. The counselor is a resource, I said. Lots of kids use counseling. That's not concerning, it's healthy. Maybe, Leora said. But combined with everything else, the withdrawal, the difficulty at dinner, not fitting in with the family rhythm, it makes us wonder if maybe she needs more stability than a temporary situation can provide. When someone who hasn't called in 11 months suddenly wants to talk about your child's stability, they're not concerned about your child. They're concerned about their plan. Ren is in a stable situation, I said. She's with her grandparents. She's in school. She has a routine. But it's temporary, Leora pressed. And kids need permanence, Saskia. They need to know where they belong. Have you thought about how long this is going to last? Another few months? A year? What happens when you get assigned to another site? I saved the document and opened my evidence matrix file, scrolling through the rows while she talked. School pickup disparity, monitored calls, lockout drawings. I'm working on transitioning back to Colorado. I lied. Should be resolved by spring. Spring, Leora repeated. So another 6 months. Saskia. I'm going to be honest with you, sister to sister. Have you thought about permanent guardianship? Mom and Dad would be happy to. I mean, they basically already are her guardians. Legally, it would just make it official. There it was. Guardianship. I stopped scrolling. I am her guardian, Leora. I said, ice forming in my voice. I'm her mother. Of course, she said quickly. I just mean, with you traveling so much for work, maybe permanent legal guardianship would give her more stability. Especially with winter coming. Colorado winters are hard, you know. She'd have a real home, real permanence. A real family structure. She said guardianship again. That was 3 times in 90 seconds. There's a specific kind of rage that comes from realizing your family isn't just hurting your child. They're hurting her strategically with an end game. Winter, I said slowly. Why are you bringing up winter specifically? Oh, just, cold weather snow kids need warm coats and boots and stability when it gets harsh out. It's harder to be temporary when winter hits. I pulled up my phone photos, found the October drawing, the one with handprints on glass from the outside. The one with snow. I need to go, Leora, I said. Thanks for the call. Wait, Saskia, can we just... I hung up. I sat in that field office for 10 minutes, staring at my screen, connecting pieces I'd been seeing separately. Lockout drawings September and October. Custody push November, weeks later. Timing coordinated. Narrative Wren failing to integrate needs permanent solution. Solution guardianship transfer. Winter mentions 3 times. Lock her outside. I said aloud to the empty trailer. Document her withdrawal. Call it failure to integrate. Suggest custody transfer. Blame it on her inability to adapt. I opened the evidence matrix and clicked into row 7. Date November 17th, 2021. Data point sister Leora custody push via phone call. Source direct conversation recorded in notes. Pattern manufactured narrative of failed placement used to justify permanent guardianship transfer. Keywords: guardianship 3 times, permanent, stability, winter 3 times. Combined with previous lockout evidence suggests premeditated conspiracy. Severity: critical. Family coordinating to acquire legal custody of child, while simultaneously creating conditions that justify transfer. I typed the last line slowly, my hands shaking. Implication: they want my daughter, likely connected to $1.8 million trust fund access. I saved the file, backed it up, sat back in my chair. You want my daughter? I whispered to the empty room. You're torturing my daughter to justify taking her. And you think I won't see it? I stared at row 7 in the evidence matrix, premeditated conspiracy to acquire legal custody, and the pieces locked together like a blueprint I'd been reading upside down for months. They weren't struggling with a difficult child. They were creating a difficult situation to justify a legal takeover. The first transaction that made me stop scrolling was dated February 3rd, 2021, $2,000 deposited at 9:07 a.m., $380 withdrawn at 2:43 p.m., followed by a charge at Sports Authority for $347.89 in the name of youth baseball equipment. My daughter doesn't play baseball. I'd logged into the joint account 2 hours after hanging up with Leora, sitting in my hotel room with a legal pad and the kind of focus I usually reserved for complex fraud cases. The custody conspiracy was clear, but conspiracies need fuel, and fuel is usually money. I'd set up automatic deposits when Wren moved to my parents' house, $2,000 on the first of every month guardian stipend to cover her care. Food, clothing, activities, whatever she needed. I'd never checked how they spent it because I'd trusted them. I didn't trust them anymore. I downloaded 11 months of statements February through December and opened Excel. Created columns, date deposit, amount withdrawal, amount days until withdrawal, merchant category. February $2,000 deposited February 1st. Withdrawn $1,650 on February 3rd. Remaining $350. March $2,000 deposited March 1st. Withdrawn $1,420 on March 2nd. Remaining $580. April $2,000 deposited April 1st. Withdrawn $1,780 on April 3rd. Remaining $220. I send $2,000. I said aloud to the empty room. They withdraw $1,500 within 2 days, every single month. I kept typing, filling the spreadsheet with the pattern that was so obvious I couldn't believe I'd missed it. May, June, July, August, September, October, November, same thing. Large withdrawal within 48 hours of deposit, minimal balance remaining. At the bottom, I added a calculation. Total sent $22,000. Average monthly withdrawal, $1,545. Total withdrawn, approximately $17,000. Where did $17,000 go? I whispered. Then I remembered I was an authorized user on my parents' credit card. They'd added me years ago for emergencies when I traveled for work, in case they needed to make a purchase on my behalf. I'd forgotten I still had access to view the transactions. I opened the credit card portal and filtered for the dates following each large withdrawal. February 3rd, 2 hours after the $380 withdrawal. Sports Authority, $347.89. Description: Youth baseball equipment. March 2nd, same day as $1,420 withdrawal. Dick's Sporting Goods, $156.43. Description: Athletic footwear. April 5th, 2 days after $1,780 withdrawal. Baseball League registration, $340. Money leaves a trail, the way water leaves sediment. You can lie about where it went, but the bank statement remembers everything, timestamps and all. I kept scrolling. May $412 at Sporting Goods store. June $289 at Dick's. July $278 for equipment. August league fees, again $360. I opened a new tab and went to the store's website, looked up youth baseball equipment. Checked the sizes in past orders using the tracking numbers. Boys' sizes 10 to 12. Beckett's size. I searched for children's clothing charges. Found them Target, $127. Old Navy, $89. Gap Kids, $156. I click through to the order details using the account access. Boys' clothing, sizes 10 to 12, every single one. Ren wore size 7 to 8. They're using her money for Beckett, I said, voice shaking. They're taking Ren's guardian stipend and buying Beckett baseball equipment. I went back to the spreadsheet and started a new column, documented Beckett expenses, entered each charge with date and merchant. Then I had another thought. I opened Facebook, navigated to Leora's profile public because she'd never understood privacy settings, and scrolled back to February 2021. February 15th. Photo of Beckett in baseball uniform holding a new bat. Caption: Ready for season. So grateful for Grandma and Grandpa's support. Date of Sports Authority charge February 3rd. I screenshotted it. March 15th. Photo of Beckett in new cleats. Big smile. Caption: New gear for our star player. Thank you, Grandma and Grandpa. Date of Dick's Sporting Goods charge March 2nd. Screenshot. June 8th. Beckett in full baseball uniform, professional looking. Caption: New uniform day. Grandma and Grandpa spoiling their boy. Date of $412 Sporting Goods charge June 5th. Screenshot. When someone is stealing from your child while posting photos thanking themselves for their generosity, you're not dealing with confusion. You're dealing with someone who thinks you're too far away to notice the receipts. August 20th. Beckett with expensive equipment bag. Caption, ready for playoffs. So blessed to have Grandma and Grandpa in our corner. Date of $289 Dick's Sporting Goods charge, August 18th. Screenshot. They're not even hiding it, I said voice flat. March 14th, charge $156. March 15th, Leora posts new cleats. June 5th, charge $412. June 8th, new uniform. It's all there. I created a new folder on my desktop financial evidence, saved every screenshot, went back to the credit card portal and downloaded 11 months of statements as PDFs. Then I opened the evidence matrix and created a new tab financial embezzlement. Row 1, February 3rd, 2021. $1,650 withdrawn from Guardian account. $347.89. Sports Authority Youth Baseball Equipment. Social media evidence Leora post February 15th crediting grandparents. Beneficiary Beckett Dalton. Row 2, March 2nd, 2021. $1,420 withdrawn. $156.43 Dick's Sporting Goods Athletic Footwear Boys size 10 to 12. Social media evidence Leora post March 15th. Beneficiary Beckett Dalton. I kept typing, row after row, every withdrawal, every charge, every social media post with its grateful caption and smiling photo of Beckett in gear purchased with Wren's money. At row 11, I added a summary cell. Total Guardian stipend sent $22,000 over 11 months. Total documented diversion to Beckett expenses $18,400. Estimated actual expenditure on Wren's care $3,600. Minimal food extended day program fees. Pattern systematic embezzlement of Guardian funds. Monthly stipend intended for Wren's care systematically diverted to fund Beckett's activities and wardrobe. I sat back staring at the numbers. That's not poor budgeting, I said to the screen. That's systematic theft. I clicked into a new cell and typed, motive financial benefit from Guardian role. Current benefit $2,000 per month stipend being embezzled. Future benefit if permanent custody granted continued stipend access plus potential trust fund control, $1.8 million. Conclusion: custody conspiracy has dual financial motive. Parents not keeping Wren out of love or family duty, keeping her for money. Permanent guardianship equals permanent income stream plus trust fund access. Note: statements don't lie. People who lie leave tracks. I saved the file, backed it up to 3 locations, sat in that hotel room staring at the financial tab at $18,400 in documented theft at 11 months of lies, timestamped and photographed. I saved the financial tab and sat back staring at $18,400 in documented theft, each row, a lie, each charge, a diversion, each social media post, a public performance of generosity funded by my daughter's money. They weren't just trying to take custody. They were already treating Wren's resources like their personal fund for Beckett's childhood, and permanent guardianship would give them the trust fund too. $22,000 was just the beginning. I found the dog on a night in December when the temperature dropped to 18 degrees and the garage had no heat. He was 15 years old, arthritic, and the only living thing in that house who was happy to see me. I heard whimpering around 6 p.m. after Grandma Marlene had sent me to my room for the 3rd time that week, for reasons I didn't understand. The sound came from the detached garage, thin and desperate. I slipped out through the back door while Vernon watched television and Marlene washed dinner dishes. The garage was dark and smelled like motor oil and cold concrete. I found the light switch. In the corner, on a thin blanket that had probably been expensive once but was now threadbare and stained, lay an old golden retriever mix with graying fur and cloudy eyes. "You're so cold," I whispered, kneeling beside him. How long have you been out here? His water bowl was frozen solid, a disk of ice in a metal dish. The food bowl was empty, except for crumbs. A space heater sat unplugged near the wall. I found the outside hose spigot still working despite the cold and refilled his water bowl. He drank half of it in 30 seconds, then looked up at me like I'd performed a miracle. His collar had a tag that caught the light. I tilted it to read copper. Copper, I said, and his tail moved once. Nobody says your name anymore, do they? I sat on the concrete floor, freezing even through my jeans, and ran my hand along his back. He leaned into the touch so hard he nearly fell over, and I understood this was the first kindness he'd felt in longer than I could imagine. I stayed 30 minutes until my hands went numb. When I left, I promised to come back tomorrow. I did, and the next day, and the next. Every afternoon after school, I'd go straight to the garage instead of inside. Fresh water first, Vernon never refilled it. Then I'd sit with Copper sometimes, bringing table scraps hidden in my pockets. When dinner included leftovers Marlene would have thrown away anyway. Copper perked up when I opened the garage door. Only for me. He ignored Vernon when he came to get tools. He tolerated Marlene on the rare occasions she brought food. And he'd never met Beckett. My cousin was allergic, which was apparently why a dog who'd lived inside for 12 years now lived in an unheated garage. When you're 8 years old and you find something that needs you, a cold dog in a garage, a person in a storm drain, anything alive and suffering, you don't think about whether you're allowed to care. You just do. And then you learn that caring is evidence against you. 3 weeks into my visits, I overheard Vernon talking to Marlene in the kitchen. She's out there again with that dog," he said, voice sharp with something I'd learned to recognize as disapproval. "Making him needy. He was fine before." "Vernon, someone has to check his water," Marlene said, but her voice was small. "He's 15 years old. He's not going to last much longer anyway. No point getting attached." I stood in the hallway, frozen, understanding that my grandfather resented me caring for an animal no one else wanted to touch. In January, Copper stopped eating. His breathing sounded wet and labored. He couldn't stand without his back legs shaking. "Vernon, he needs to see a vet," Marlene said at breakfast one morning. "He's really not doing well." Vernon sighed like she'd asked him to move a mountain. "Fine, I'll take him this afternoon." I wasn't there for the vet visit, I was at school, but I heard about it that evening when I went to check on Copper and found Vernon in the garage putting tools away. "Vet says he's got kidney problems," Vernon said without looking at me. "Wants to run tests, start medication. Wants $240 for blood work and $85 a month for pills." "Is Copper going to get medicine?" I asked. Vernon closed the toolbox with a metal click. "He's 15 years old. Not worth it." He walked past me into the house. I didn't know then what that conversation had sounded like at Morrison Road Veterinary Clinic, where Dr. Holloway, 49, had seen enough neglect cases to know when someone was letting an animal die to save money. The vet wrote down my grandfather's exact words, "Not worth the cost." And I didn't know then that those 4 words would become evidence, because everything my grandfather said out loud eventually became something he couldn't take back. Dr. Holloway had explained that Copper's kidneys were failing, that without treatment the dog would decline rapidly. That pain management was humane even if cure wasn't possible. And Vernon had said in a tone the vet noted as dismissive, "He's 15 years old, not worth spending money on a dog that old." Dr. Holloway wrote it in the chart. Owner declined recommended treatment. Stated quote, "Not worth the cost," end quote. Prognosis without treatment, poor. That night, I heard Vernon telling Marlene, "I'm not throwing money at a dying dog." I went to my room, pulled out my markers, and drew. Brown for Copper's collar, gray for the metal chain that should attach collar to something stable, something that keeps you safe and tethered and belonging. But in my drawing, the chain was broken links separated in the middle, metal torn apart collar floating alone, with no connection to anything. I stared at the broken links. "The chain breaks here," I whispered to the empty room. "Right here where the collar should hold." I understood even at 8 what I was drawing. Copper was dying because they'd decided he wasn't worth the cost to keep alive. And I was learning that I fit in the same category. I drew the collar because I understood what they were doing, letting something die slowly because they'd decided it wasn't worth the cost to keep it alive, and I was learning I fit in the same category. I folded the drawing carefully and tucked it under the mattress with the others, the door with no handle, the red mouth eating the small figure. And now, the broken chain. I held up the drawing of Copper's collar, the chain broken, in the middle metal links separated like bones pulled apart. I didn't know that within a month Copper would die in that garage, and my grandfather would need someone to blame, and I'd be the only one who'd cared enough to be guilty. But the vet had written it down, not worth the cost, and that receipt would matter more than any drawing. The alert came through the National Weather Service system at 2:47 p.m. on December 18th. 2022 high confidence forecast for extreme winter storm wind chill, minus 25 degrees Celsius whiteout conditions, life-threatening exposure time under 90 minutes, and Desmond Garrett had my daughter's address in his emergency contact list. Desmond, 52. National Weather Service meteorologist at the Boulder office, had worked disaster weather events with me for 6 years. We'd cataloged tornado damage together, assessed flood-compromised structures, documented the aftermath, when people ignored warnings and died. He knew I had a daughter in Colorado. He knew I worried. He reviewed the storm models that Sunday afternoon, major blizzard system tracking directly toward the Front Range landfall projected for December 20th evening. Sustained winds 40-plus miles per hour. Temperature dropped to minus 12 degrees Celsius with wind chill, pushing minus 25 degrees Celsius. Whiteout conditions lasting 6 to 8 hours. He pulled up the exposure calculation chart we both used for disaster assessments. Outdoor exposure time to hypothermia, 60 to 90 minutes for healthy adults, 30 to 45 minutes for children. This one's going to be bad, he said to a colleague passing his desk. Direct hit on Denver Metro, minus 12 ambient, minus 25, with wind chill. He opened his email and typed, to saskia.mercer@guardianmutual.com. Subject urgent, major blizzard Wednesday night, Lakewood direct path. Saskia, major storm. Wednesday evening, December 20th. If Ren is in Lakewood, make sure she's secured inside. This is a shelter-in-place event. Wind chill, minus 25 degrees Celsius whiteout conditions, 6 to 8 hours. Do not let her outside for any reason. Child exposure time to hypothermia, 30 to 45 minutes maximum. Attach NOAA data for your records. Desmond. He attached the full Weather Service bulletin, the exposure time calculations, and the storm track maps, showing Lakewood directly in the path. Hit send at 2:51 p.m. I received it at 3:10 p.m. Pacific Time, sitting in my California field office reviewing foundation damage reports from the latest earthquake assessment. The subject line made me open it immediately. I read Desmond's message twice. Clicked the NOAA attachment. Storm track maps appeared on my screen, red and orange bands converging on the Denver metro area, Lakewood highlighted in the impact zone. Temperature projections minus 12 degrees Celsius, ambient wind chill, minus 25 degrees Celsius. Exposure calculations in a table I'd used dozens of times for disaster documentation. Children hypothermia, onset 30 to 45 minutes. Critical condition within 60 minutes. Wind chill minus 25, I said aloud to the empty trailer. Exposure time children 30 to 45 minutes. Jesus Christ. My professional training kicked in, the same training that had taught me to read weather data, assess structural failure, document the timeline from warning to disaster to death. I'd written reports on people who died in conditions exactly like this. I'd cataloged their last known locations, calculated their exposure times, documented the precise sequence exposure, onset, critical death. I knew exactly what these numbers meant. A child in minus 12 degrees Celsius with 40-mile-per-hour wind wouldn't last an hour. Maybe less if she was small, if she wasn't dressed properly, if she'd been outside before, and her core temperature was already compromised. I thought of Wren in my parents' house. I thought of the lockout drawings. I thought of Vernon's dismissiveness, his resentment, his willingness to let a dog die rather than spend money. I grabbed my phone. "Pick up," I said, dialing my parents' landline. "Pick up. Pick up." Vernon answered on the fourth ring. "Mercer Residence." He said, formal as always. "Dad, listen to me." I said, no greeting, no pleasantries. Major blizzard Wednesday night. -12 degrees, maybe colder with wind chill. Wren needs to stay inside. No going outside for any reason. Promise me. A pause. "It's just snow, Saskia," he said, tone immediately dismissive. "We've lived in Colorado 40 years. We know how to handle winter. This isn't regular snow," I said, pulling up the NOAA data on my screen. "This is a life-threatening weather event. Exposure time for children is 30 minutes before hypothermia sets in. I need you to promise me she stays indoors, no matter what." "You're overreacting," Vernon said. "Calling from California to tell us how to handle Colorado weather. We don't need parenting advice." When someone who investigates disaster sites for a living tells you the weather data shows life-threatening conditions, and you respond with, "It's just snow," you're not disagreeing with an opinion, you're ignoring mathematics. And mathematics doesn't care if you believe it. "This isn't advice, it's meteorological data," I said, voice rising. "The National Weather Service is issuing extreme weather warnings. Child exposure time is 30 minutes maximum before hypothermia. I need you to promise me. Promise me she stays inside. We don't need instructions on how to keep a child safe." Vernon said, irritation clear in his voice. "We've raised children through plenty of winters." "Promise me," I repeated. "We'll be fine," he said flatly. "Dad." The line went dead. I sat holding the phone, his words echoing. "It's just snow. We'll be fine." There is a specific helplessness that comes from being an expert who sees disaster approaching and being dismissed by someone who thinks 40 years of surviving winters means they can survive this one until they can't. I opened my laptop, pulled up the evidence matrix, clicked into the next empty row. Row 12. Date December 18, 2022. Data point weather emergency warning issued by National Weather Service. Major blizzard forecast life-threatening conditions, child exposure time to hypothermia, 30 to 45 minutes. Father contacted with explicit warning and request for safety assurance. Response dismissive. Refuse to acknowledge severity. Refuse to guarantee child's indoor safety during documented dangerous weather event. Exact quote, "It's just snow." Pattern systematic dismissal of daughter's safety concerns, dismissal of expert warnings, refusal to prioritize child welfare. Time to event 48 hours. I saved the file, stared at the screen. 11 months of evidence, systematic mistreatment, custody conspiracy, financial embezzlement, dog neglect, lockout drawings, and now refusal to protect a child during weather conditions that could kill her in under an hour. And I was 1,000 miles away. I pulled up a calendar. Today, Sunday, December 18th. Storm landfall, Wednesday evening, December 20th. 48 hours. 48 hours, I whispered to the empty office. My mother knew. She knew something was about to break, and she was too far away to stop it, and her father wouldn't listen. And 48 hours felt like standing on a bridge watching a car drive toward the edge. 48 hours felt like both forever, and no time at all long enough to imagine everything that could go wrong, short enough that I couldn't get there, even if I left immediately. I stared at the evidence matrix, 12 rows of documented harm, and realized I'd been building a case to protect my daughter after something happened. I should have been building a case to stop it before it did. Ruth Webb was 71 years old and had lived next to my parents for 38 years, and she called me on December 19th at 9:14 a.m. to say 6 words that would change everything. "You should see this footage." I'd been awake since 5, already searching flight options when my phone rang at 9:14 a.m. with a Colorado number I didn't recognize. 36 hours until the blizzard hit. My phone rang with a Colorado number I didn't recognize. Saskia, it's Ruth Webb from next door to your parents. A woman's voice said steady and careful. My security camera caught the child outside. Multiple times. For long periods. Outside? When? How many times? Kim, 6 times I can count clearly from July through now. The longest was 35 minutes in November. I grabbed a notepad. Ruth had spent that morning reviewing archived security footage. Her camera sat at the corner of her house, angled toward her driveway, but capturing my parents' front porch. Motion detection software flagged clips automatically. July 14th, August 3rd, September 21st, October, twice November 8th, and December 12th. Ruth said, "How long in each clip?" July 15 minutes, August 12, September 18, October 7th was 8 minutes. October 23rd was 26. November 8th was 35 minutes in 38-degree weather light jacket only. December 12th was 22 minutes. I wrote every number. December 12th. There's something else, Ruth said, voice changing. Someone pulled the curtain aside. You can see it. The curtain moves. Someone looks right at her through the window, then closes it. She's still out there 8 more minutes after that. The difference between suspecting something and having video evidence is the difference between saying, "I think they hurt my child," and saying, "Watch this count the minutes, see the curtain move." One is a claim, the other is math. I'm landing at 4:35, I said. Can I come straight from the airport? Yes. I have digital copies, external drive. And Saskia, I've been keeping a written log too, since July 2021. 2 months after she arrived, I said quietly. Yes. I landed at 4:47 p.m. and drove straight to Lakewood. Ruth Webb answered before I knocked thin silver hair eyes that had seen too much. Her kitchen table was set up like a command center laptop external drive spiral notebook next to a mug that said, "World's Best Teacher." I taught 2nd grade for 32 years, she said. I know what abuse looks like, and I know what courts need: dates, time-specific observations. No opinions, just facts. She opened a laptop folder labeled Mercer, Archive, July 2021 to present. 6 video files appeared, each dated. Chronologically, Ruth said. July 14th, 2021, 6:18 p.m. Runtime 15:33. Black and white footage, slightly grainy but clear. My parents' porch in the left third of frame. A small figure in shorts and t-shirt near the door. Wren. Knocking. No one opened the door. The timestamp ticked forward. 3 minutes. 5. 10. At minute 12, she starts to cry. Ruth said quietly. I watched my daughter's shoulders shake. Watched her knock again. Watched the door stay closed. 15 minutes and 33 seconds before the door opened. Ruth played the next files. August 3rd, 12 minutes. September 21st, 18 minutes. November 8th, 35 minutes light jacket, 38 degrees outside. December 12th, Ruth said. Watch at minute 14. Wren on porch knocking. At timestamp 14:06, the living room curtain moved, someone pulling it aside 6 inches. A dark silhouette behind glass. Stop, I said. Go back. The curtain parted. Someone standing there looking out at the child. 4 seconds, 5, 6. Curtain fell closed. Wren stayed outside 8 more minutes. Someone looked out, I whispered, watched her, and left her there. Yes, Ruth said. When a 71-year-old retired teacher opens a spiral notebook and says, I've been documenting since July 2021. You're not just getting a witness. You're getting someone who knew the system would need proof and spent 17 months collecting it. Ruth opened the spiral notebook. Pages filled with careful handwriting, each entry dated. July 7th, 2021. Heard raised voices through shared wall approximately 7:15 p.m. Child's name shouted, Wren. Door slam. Child knocking outside 10+ minutes before let in. July 22nd, 2021 evening. Shouting heard. Child visible on porch 8 to 10 minutes. August 3rd, 2021, 6:42 p.m. Child outside knocking. 12 minutes per camera timestamp. The entries continued. Page after page. 17 months. I started July 7th, 2 months after she arrived, Ruth said. Raised voices, door slam, child knocking outside, 10 minutes minimum. I flipped through pages, hands shaking. Dates, times, observations. Each one documented like a teacher grading papers, careful, precise, factual. September 21st. Child on porch 6+ p.m. counted 18 minutes, finally admitted. October 23rd evening, heard shouting, Vernon's voice, child outside, camera shows 26 minutes. November 8th, 5:30 p.m. start. Child outside, light jacket, temperature checked online 38 degrees Fahrenheit. Camera timestamp 35 minutes total. Excessive for conditions. I found the last entry. December 12th, 2022. Evening. Curtain twitched at 14:06 timestamp per camera review. Child outside in cold. Counted from video 22 minutes total. No coat visible from my angle. Finally let in 6:51 p.m. Door slammed. I'm a teacher, Ruth said quietly. Was a teacher. Courts need documentation, so I documented. You watched this happen for 17 months. I said not accusing, just understanding. I wrote it down so someone could stop it, Ruth said. I didn't know who. I didn't know when. But I knew someone would need to know, and when they did, they'd need proof that couldn't be dismissed as one neighbor's opinion. She handed me the external drive. Every video file, every date. Weather data cross-referenced where applicable. The log is yours, 2 original and photocopies. Ruth handed me the spiral notebook, 17 months of entries, July 2021 to December 2022. Each one dated and timed, each one a small active witness that would become evidence. The December 12th entry sat at the bottom of the page. Evening. Curtain twitched. Child outside in cold. Counted 22 minutes. No coat visible. Finally let in. Door slammed. 22 minutes was long enough to prove deliberate cruelty. 8 days later, in worse cold, it would be longer. I booked the flight from Ruth's kitchen table while she was still showing me the December footage. United 1847 SFO to DEN, departing 6:20 p.m., arriving 9:43 p.m., and told my supervisor I was taking emergency family leave effective immediately. How long? He asked. I don't know, I said. Family emergency. I'm leaving California today. I'll call when I know more. I hung up before he could ask questions. Ruth printed copies of her log entries while I transferred the video files to my laptop. 6 clips, 17 months of written observations, weather data she'd cross-referenced from online records. Don't tell anyone I'm here, I said as I stood to leave. Not my parents, not my sister. I need them to think I'm still in California. They won't hear it from me, Ruth said. I drove back to San Francisco, caught the 6:20 p.m. flight, landed in Denver at 9:43 p.m. Mountain Time. Rented a car, drove 12 minutes to the Courtyard Marriott, close enough to my parents' Lakewood house to respond quickly, far enough away that they wouldn't know I was there. I need the room for at least a week, maybe more, I told the desk clerk. And I'll need business center printer access. Of course, she said, handing me the key card. Room 237, second floor, facing the parking lot. I didn't call my parents, didn't drive past their house, went straight to the hotel room, set my laptop on the desk, and sat on the bed considering my options. I could drive there right now. 12 minutes in this rental car. Walk up to that door, take Ren leave. My daughter, my rights. Done. But my professional training said something else. Confrontation without documentation leads to he said, she said. They'll deny everything. They'll say I'm unstable, that I'm overreacting, that I abandoned my daughter for work, and now I'm trying to manufacture a crisis to cover my guilt. They'll use my emergency return as evidence of instability. They'll point to their years of experience raising children, their stable home, their community ties, and their lawyer, because they'd get a lawyer, immediately would ask, "Where's your proof?" When you're a disaster investigator, you learn that intervention before collapse saves lives, but documentation after collapse prosecutes the guilty. And I was choosing documentation, which meant I was choosing to let something break before I stopped it. "I have pieces," I said aloud to the empty room. "I need the full case, every source documented, every connection mapped bulletproof before I move." I opened my laptop and set a phone alarm for 5 a.m. 24 hours to build what ends them, I whispered. Then I get my daughter. Before I reveal the 6 evidence layers I built that night, are you with me? Comment A if you'd build the case first, or B if you'd confront immediately, and add your reason in 5 to 10 words. What I chose next determined everything. Note the next part includes fictionalized details for emotional impact. The lesson matters most. I worked through the night. First, I created 6 digital folders on my laptop, each one representing an independent source of evidence. 6 pillars. 6 witnesses who didn't know each other, couldn't have coordinated, all saying the same thing. Folder 1, Weather/NOAA, Desmond's data package. Storm projections, exposure time calculations, the bulletin showing minus 12 degrees Celsius ambient temperature with minus 25 degrees Celsius wind chill. Child hypothermia timeline 30 to 45 minutes. Professional meteorologist's warning delivered 48 hours in advance. Father's dismissal documented in my notes. Folder 2, Witness/Neighbor. Ruth Webb's 17-month handwritten log, July 2021 to December 2022. 6 security camera video files showing lockout incidents, timestamps, durations. December 12 footage with curtain movement at 14:06 visual proof. Someone looked out and chose to leave child outside. Cross-referenced weather data showing temperatures during each incident. Folder 3, School. Celeste Thornton's archive. 18 drawings spanning February to October 2021. Doors with no inside handles, windows, curtains, footprints outside structures. Snow falling in May. Session notes documenting withdrawal, isolation, monosyllabic communication. School pickup logs showing 2-hour daily discrepancy between Beckett and Wren. Folder 4, Veterinary. Dr. Holloway's records from Morrison Road Veterinary Clinic, January 2022. Visit kidney disease diagnosis treatment recommendations refused. Exact quote, documented in file, not worth the cost. Medical proof of deliberate neglect, financial decision to let animal die. Folder 5, Financial. 11 months of bank statements. Guardian stipend deposits and withdrawals. Credit card charges cross-referenced with Leora's social media posts. Beckett's baseball equipment clothing league fees, all purchased with Wren's money. Total documented embezzlement approximately $18,400. Folder 6, Legal/Trust. Conrad Abbott's disclosure from First Bank, November 9th, 2022, phone inquiry about modifying guardian designation and access protocols, if sole custody granted. 11 days before December 20th blizzard, premeditation documented. Building a case is like building a structure. You need multiple support beams, redundancy in every system. So if one element fails, the whole thing doesn't fall. And I had 6 beams now, each one load-bearing. 6 sources. I said at 3 a.m. labeling the folders. None of them know each other, all saying the same thing. Ruth's footage proved lockouts happened. Wren's drawings predicted them months before Ruth's camera caught them. The counselor documented the psychological damage. The vet recorded financial neglect. Bank statements showed motive. The trust officer proved conspiracy. 53 individual pieces of evidence, all dated, all sourced, all corroborating the same pattern: systematic abuse, custody conspiracy, financial exploitation. At 5:30 a.m. on December 20th, I saved the final version and printed key documents. 6 folders, chronologically organized, cross-referenced by source and date. This was the case strong enough for CPS intervention. Family court custody modification. Potential criminal charges if needed. Each layer independently strong, combined overwhelming. I checked the weather alert on my phone. Blizzard arriving this evening. 6 to 8 hours away. 53 pieces of evidence. I said, reviewing the final file. 6 independent sources, 17 months documented. 1 irrefutable fact: they hurt my child systematically and I can prove it. I pulled up the NOAA bulletin again. Storm hits tonight. Vernon refused my warning. He won't take precautions. But I have the case now, I whispered. After the storm passes, I file everything. I stared at the laptop screen at the 6 folders that would destroy my parents' custody claim, that would protect Ren legally and permanently. This ends you, I said quietly. All of you. And it's all documented, dated, witnessed, recorded. You can't lie your way out of evidence. The case was complete at 5:47 a.m. on December 20th, 2022. 6 folders, 53 pieces of evidence, 17 months documented, 6 independent sources, bulletproof and devastating. The blizzard would hit in 13 hours. I sat in that hotel room thinking I'd built the weapon that would save my daughter, not realizing I'd built the evidence that would prosecute what was about to happen, but couldn't prevent it. Blame is a language adults speak fluently when they need someone small to absorb their failures, and on December 20th, 2022, at 6 p.m. in a garage that smelled like motor oil and wet concrete, and something final, I learned that grief without accountability becomes accusation, and the nearest child becomes the crime. Copper was lying on his side near the workbench behind the blue tarp where the Christmas decorations were stored. I'd come looking for him because dinner was ready, and he always came when called, except tonight he hadn't. I pushed through the garage door expecting to find him sleeping, maybe dreaming. Instead, I found him still, completely still. His eyes half open, but not seeing, his mouth slightly parted, his body rigid in a way that even at 8 years old, I recognized as wrong, as permanent, as gone. I didn't scream. I knelt beside him and touched his side cold through the fur, and understood that Copper was dead, that 15 years of breathing had stopped. I stayed there for maybe 30 seconds, my hand on his ribs that would never rise again, and then I walked back into the house and said the 6 words that would determine the next 90 minutes of my life. Copper's dead in the garage. Vernon's fork clattered against his plate. Leora, who'd arrived an hour earlier for dinner, set down her wine glass with deliberate precision. My grandmother pressed her napkin to her mouth, and in the half-second before anyone spoke, I saw something pass between Vernon and Leora, a look I couldn't decode then, but recognize now as coordination, as opportunity identified as blame about to be assigned. "What did you do?" Vernon's voice was flat, factual, like he was asking about homework. "Nothing, I just found him." "Dogs don't just die." This from Leora, leaning forward, her eyes narrow. "What happened before you found him?" "Nothing. I went to get him for dinner and he was—" "Where were you this afternoon?" Vernon stood his chair, scraping loud against the floor. "Were you in the garage?" "I played outside, but I didn't—" "Did you feed him something? Give him something he shouldn't have?" Leora's questions came faster now. "Did you leave the door open?" I followed them to the garage, trying to explain that I hadn't done anything, that Copper had been fine this morning. Vernon stood over Copper's body with his hands on his hips, his jaw working. Leora crouched down, touched Copper's side the way I had then looked up at Vernon with an expression I'd later understand was calculation. Here's what I know now that I couldn't know. Then Copper had been dying for months. Kidney failure, progressive and untreated, because Vernon said veterinary care for a 15-year-old dog was throwing money away. Leora knew because she'd visited in October and suggested euthanasia, and Vernon had refused. They both knew Copper was failing, that his death was imminent and entirely unrelated to anything an 8-year-old child could cause. But knowledge and accountability are different languages, and blame requires neither. This is neglect. Leora stood brushing off her hands. Someone wasn't watching him properly. We were back at the dining table, the roast congealing on the serving platter, and the word someone hung in the air like smoke. Vernon hadn't spoken since we'd left the garage. He'd wrapped Copper in the blue tarp, carried him to the shed, then washed his hands for a long time at the kitchen sink while I stood in the doorway saying, I was sorry, I didn't know what I was sorry for, but I was sorry anyway. Responsibility has to mean something. Leora cut her meat with precise movements, her voice reasonable, conversational. Children need to understand consequences. I didn't do anything, I said again, quieter now, because repetition was making the words meaningless. That's the problem. Vernon's fork scraped his plate. Didn't do anything. Didn't notice he was sick. Didn't pay attention. Didn't care. The accusation landed like a physical blow because it was perfectly inverted. I'd noticed Copper was moving slower, drinking more water, sleeping in strange places, and I'd told Vernon twice, and he'd said the dog was old, that I needed to stop bothering him with nonsense. But that truth had no place at this table in this narrative being constructed where an 8-year-old girl's negligence killed a 15-year-old dog, and the adults who'd refused veterinary care were blameless observers of tragedy. Here's the architecture of scapegoating. First, establish the crime. Second, identify the criminal. Third, construct causation regardless of logic. Fourth, assign punishment disproportionate to any actual transgression. Because the punishment isn't about justice, it's about power, about reasserting hierarchy, about ensuring the small person knows their place. Vernon and Leora built that architecture in 90 minutes over cold roast beef, while I sat learning that truth is optional when adults need someone to blame. Maybe she needs time to think about responsibility. Leora's voice was casual, thoughtful, like she was just then considering the idea rather than offering something pre-planned. Some reflection, outside perhaps, where she can consider her actions. Vernon looked up from his plate, his eyes meeting Leora's across the table. Outside, just for a while, until she understands. I looked between them, not understanding yet, but beginning to feel the shape of what was coming the way you feel thunder before you hear it. Outside, it was December 20th. It was 7:30 p.m. Through the dining room window, I could see the first snowflakes beginning to fall, small and sparse and purposeful, the leading edge of what the weather report had called a historic blizzard. Someone needs to learn, Vernon said quietly, and Leora smiled, not at me, at him, a smile of agreement and accomplishment, and something that looked almost like satisfaction. The snow was falling faster now, visible in the porch light, accumulating on the railing in thin white lines. 3 hours until they'd open that door and tell me to go outside and think about what I'd done. 3 hours until the lock clicked behind me and the temperature dropped and my hands left prints on the glass that nobody inside would answer. The door opened at 8:10 p.m., and with it came the blizzard, not as threat anymore, but as weapon. 3 hours had passed since Vernon's quiet verdict at dinner, 3 hours while snow accumulated and wind speeds climbed. Now Vernon stood in the doorframe with the storm howling behind him, cold air rushing into the warm house, his face holding no anger, just the flat certainty of a man executing a decision already made. Outside, his voice cut through the wind. Now, 10 minutes to think about what happens when you don't take care of things. I was wearing flannel pajamas with cartoon rabbits. Socks. No shoes. No coat. No gloves. I'd been in my room waiting for bedtime, not understanding that the punishment announced 3 hours ago was about to begin. I looked past Vernon at the wall of white beyond the porch at snow so thick I couldn't see the mailbox 15 feet away. It's a blizzard. Should have thought of that before Copper died. Leora watched from the hallway, arms crossed. My grandmother stood behind her, one hand pressed against the wall. Nobody moved. Nobody objected. Vernon's hand gestured toward the open door, casual and final. I walked past him onto the porch. The cold hit like a physical force, air so frozen it burned my lungs, wind that cut through flannel like tissue paper. The door closed behind me with a soft click, and underneath that sound, quieter but unmistakable, I heard the deadbolt slide home. 10 minutes, he'd said. The deadbolt said something different. The porch offered no shelter. Wind came from every direction, gusting at 40 miles per hour, driving snow horizontal into my face and chest. Within 30 seconds, my pajamas were soaked. Within 60 seconds, I couldn't feel my ears. Within 90 seconds, my fingers started to burn, not numb yet, but burning, my body's blood vessels constricting, choosing which parts of me to save. I knocked on the door. 2 gentle raps, still polite, still believing in the 10 minutes. No response. Through the window beside the door, I could see the hallway light, warm and yellow, and shadows moving, someone walking past, normal evening movements in a warm house. I knocked again, harder. "Grandpa!" My voice came out small, swallowed by wind. "I'm really cold." Nothing. The shadows kept moving. Life continued inside while I stood 3 feet away. I counted to 100 slowly, the way my mother had taught me to measure time. 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi. My voice shaking, teeth chattering by 30, lips stiffening by 70. At 100, I knocked again, louder. "Please, I learned, I promise I learned." Still nothing. Through the window, I could see the living room, the television flickering blue light, someone's shoulder passing through frame. They were watching something. They were warm and dry, and watching television while I froze 3 feet beyond their wall. I didn't know then that hypothermia has stages, that the shivering racking my body was stage 1, my muscles contracting to generate heat in a last defense before shutdown. I didn't know that at -12 Celsius, inadequately dressed you have maybe 30 minutes before stage 2 begins, before confusion sets in, before your body starts making decisions your brain no longer controls. I just knew cold deeper than I'd ever felt, working inward from skin to muscle to bone. At 8:18 p.m., 8 minutes after the door had closed, the living room curtain moved. 6 inches of gap appeared, and in that gap, Vernon's face. He looked directly at me. I looked directly back. 4 seconds of eye contact. Long enough to see that his expression hadn't changed, that he registered my soaked pajamas. My blue lips, my whole body shaking so hard I gripped the porch railing to stay upright. Long enough for me to understand that he saw exactly what was happening and wasn't surprised, wasn't horrified, had maybe expected exactly this. "Grandpa, please, it's been longer than 10 minutes. His eyes held mine for 1 more second. Then the curtain fell closed. Through the thin fabric, I saw his shape turn away from the window, walking away with the same casual gait you'd use after checking the weather. "You see me," I whispered, but the wind took the words. "What do you become when the people meant to protect you choose with open eyes to let you die? Not all at once, that would be too honest, too easily named murder, but incrementally, degree by degree, minute by minute, through decisions disguised as discipline, through cruelty, wrapped in the language of lessons learned." What do you become when you're 8 years old and you understand that the line you thought existed doesn't, that you are utterly alone? At 8:20 p.m., the living room lights switched off. Darkness replaced the warm glow, sudden and absolute. 10 seconds later, the hallway light followed. Through the window, I could just make out movement, 3 shapes in the darkness. My grandmother took 1/2 step toward the door, her body angling forward like she might finally intervene. Then Leora's hand touched her arm, barely visible, and my grandmother stopped. The 3 shapes moved together toward the back of the house, toward the bedrooms, toward sleep. "Grandma." I pounded on the door with both fists, the sound flat against wind. "Grandma." No lights returned. No shapes came back. The house stood dark except for the blue flicker of the television someone had left on. "They're going to bed," I said out loud, testing the words. "They're going to bed, and I'm still out here." 12 minutes had passed since Vernon opened the door. 12 minutes into negative 12 Celsius wearing cartoon rabbits and soaked flannel. The blizzard was just beginning. The adults were sleeping. And I was alone in the dark with the wind and the cold and the understanding that nobody was coming, that the 10 minutes had been a lie, that this would last as long as they decided it would last. I had no say, no voice, no power, nothing but my body already starting to fail, and the desperate animal knowledge that I had to survive this somehow, because nobody else would save me. At 18 minutes, when my knocking hand had gone numb and the shivering turned violent, I made the calculation 8-year-olds shouldn't have to make. I stepped off the porch into the blizzard. The adults were sleeping. The door was locked. My body was failing. If I stayed, I would die waiting for mercy that wasn't coming. So I chose movement over stillness, the unknown over the certainty of freezing 3 feet from unreachable warmth. I remembered a shed from summer bike rides 3 blocks east behind the Blue House, with the overgrown garden abandoned storage that nobody locked. In August, I could run it in 2 minutes. In December, in a blizzard, in soaked pajamas and socks, 3 blocks became a different distance entirely. 3 blocks, I said out loud, my voice barely audible over wind. The shed behind the Blue House. I stepped into snow that came up to my knees. Each step required lifting my whole leg, plunging forward through powder-finding ground that might be sidewalk or lawn or street. My footprints filled behind me almost as fast as I made them, but not quite, leaving a trail of small depression sock prints in fresh snow. "I can't stay here," I whispered. "I can't." The first block took 15 minutes. Streetlights created small spheres of yellow glow every 40 feet, barely penetrating the snow. I used mailboxes as waypoints, reading house numbers through snow, caking my eyelashes. 4218422242226. I needed 4291. The numbers climbed too slowly. By the second block, the shivering had progressed from violent to convulsive, my whole body jerking with spasms I couldn't control. My fingers had stopped burning and gone completely numb. My toes felt like blocks of wood. The confusion started then. Not dramatic, just a slow fogging where thoughts took longer to form, and the distance between decision and action stretched into something elastic and uncertain. I turned the wrong way at one intersection, walked half a block before the house number 4198 registered. Wrong direction, numbers going down. I turned around, retraced my steps, found the intersection again. 4291. I said to myself over and over. Blue House, shed in back. Almost there. Hypothermia doesn't announce itself with drama, it whispers, then shouts through confusion and the seductive warmth that precedes death. I felt warm now, which made no sense because I could see my hands purple-blue in the streetlight. But my brain insisted I was warming up, that I should rest, that lying down in this soft snow would feel good. The thought floated through my mind like a gentle suggestion, and some part of me still functioning recognized it as the beginning of the end. I found the Blue House at 9:15 p.m., 43 minutes after leaving the porch. The shed sat behind it, half hidden by snow-laden bushes, a small wooden structure with a door that swung open when I pulled. Inside, darkness, dirt floor, the smell of gasoline and mildew, but no wind, no snow. I crawled into the corner and pulled my knees to my chest, trying to conserve whatever heat remained. Time became fluid after that. I might have slept, or passed out, or entered some gray space between consciousness and shutdown, where my body performed the bare minimum while my mind drifted somewhere else. The footprints saved my life, small sock prints in snow filling fast, but visible enough for a neighbor who gave a damn. Margaret Walsh, 67, retired librarian who lived in the Blue House, looked out her back window at 10:30 p.m., saw prints leading to her shed, and called 911. Officer Daniel Brennan, 34. Lakewood police found me at 10:45 p.m., Semi-conscious, curled in the corner, skin gray-blue, core temperature, 32 degrees Celsius, 4 degrees below normal hypothermia stage. 2. The edge of moderate heading toward severe. I've got her. His voice came from far away. Female child, approximately 8, severe hypothermia. Send ambulance to 4291 Garrison. Warm blankets wrapped around me, rough fabric against frozen skin that couldn't quite register temperature anymore. Locked out, I managed to whisper. He locked the door. You're safe now, Officer Brennan said. Stay with me, sweetheart. Lutheran Medical Center Emergency Room, 11 p.m. Warming blankets heated. IV fluids. Monitors beeping, steady reassurance that my heart was still beating. A nurse found my backpack still strapped to my shoulders. I'd been doing homework when Vernon called me downstairs for dinner, and I'd never taken it off habit the same way I always kept it close, since Mom tucked that emergency card inside. Inside, beneath homework and a library book, she found a laminated card with emergency contact information, my mother's cell phone number, and the Courtyard Marriott's address 12 minutes from the hospital. My mother had given me that card 6 months earlier when she left me at my grandparents' house. Insurance, she'd called it. A lifeline the grandparents didn't know existed. She arrived at 11:20 p.m., still in the clothes she'd worn, building her evidence case that morning, her face pale and terrified and absolutely furious. She sat beside my hospital bed and took my hand carefully, because my fingers were still wrapped in warming packs and I could feel her shaking. Rachel Kincaid Orty, Y1. Lutheran Medical Center social worker stood at the foot of the bed with a tablet and a mandatory reporting form, already filed electronically with Child Protective Services. Ms. Mercer. She said, her voice professionally gentle. We're required to report this to Child Protective Services. The circumstances meet criteria for endangerment. I'm here, my mother said, but she was looking at me, not the social worker. Her voice broke. I've got you, you're safe now. I looked at her, at the woman who'd been building a case while I was freezing, who'd given me a lifeline 6 months ago that had just saved my life, who was holding my hand, like she'd never let go. He looked at me. I whispered the words that would change everything. Through the window. He saw me freezing and he walked away. My mother's face went very still. Then something shifted in her expression, not surprise, but confirmation, the final piece sliding into place. Her evidence case was back at the hotel, 6 folders, 53 pieces, documenting financial abuse, neglect, systematic control. But those 4 words, he looked at me, transformed everything. This wasn't about money anymore. It was attempted murder, and I'd just handed her the proof that no jury could ignore. By the time the system began asking questions 48 hours later, my mother had already built the gallows. I just had to draw the rope. The testimony I'd whispered in that hospital room transformed her 17 months of documentation from custody dispute to criminal evidence. But words are slippery things, easy to challenge, easier to dismiss as childhood confusion or coaching or trauma-distorted memory. So the next morning, when I still couldn't speak about it without my throat closing, my mother handed me a notepad and a pen and asked me to show her instead. I drew the door first. Simple rectangle handle on the right and at eye level, my eye level 3 feet 11 inches tall, a deadbolt. I drew it extended, locked, a small line protruding from the door into the frame. My mother watched in silence, her hand resting gently on my shoulder. Can you show me what happened when you knocked? Her voice was soft, careful, giving me permission to stop any time. I turned the page. The living room window curtain parted exactly 6 inches. I measured it with my fingers on the paper, remembering the gap with precision I didn't know I possessed. Behind the curtain, a dark figure taller than the window shoulders, visible, head visible. On the outside of the glass, small handprints at the bottom edge where I'd pressed both palms while looking up. Here, I pointed to the handprints. I knocked here. He was right there. My mother's breathing changed, became deliberate and controlled. She pulled out her phone and photographed each drawing the screen, showing timestamp and date, December 21st, 2022, 9:47 a.m. She took multiple angles, making sure the details were visible: the curtain gap, width, the figure's position, the handprint placement. "I'm taking pictures of these," she said, her voice steady despite the fury I could feel radiating from her. "They're evidence, baby. They're going to help." I drew 3 more, the porch from above showing where I'd stood. Footprints in snow leading away from the house. The shed with me curled in the corner. Each one captured details I couldn't articulate with words, but could reconstruct with absolute clarity through line and proportion and spatial relationship. The drawings weren't art, they were testimony. That afternoon at 2 p.m., my mother met Adrienne Sinclair, 49, Child Protective Services investigator with 16 years of experience and a reputation for methodical, bulletproof case documentation. They sat in a hospital conference room with my mother's evidence spread across the table like a prosecution brief. "This level of documentation is extraordinary," Adrienne said, flipping through the 6 folders. "How long have you been building this?" "6 months of financial abuse," my mother replied, her voice flat and precise. "72 hours of attempted murder. Take your pick." Adrienne studied the NOAA weather data showing blizzard conditions and -12 Celsius temperatures. The neighbor's security footage documenting 6 previous lockouts. The school counselor's 18 drawings showing systematic neglect. The veterinary records proving Copper's untreated kidney failure. The bank statements showing the embezzled funds. The trust company inquiries about guardianship irregularities. And now, fresh evidence: my hospital drawings with timestamp medical report showing stage 2 hypothermia and Rachel Kincaid's mandatory abuse report quoting 4 words. He looked at me. "I'll be interviewing the grandparents tomorrow," Adrienne said, photographing each document with her department-issued tablet. "These drawings will be very useful. Insurance investigation taught my mother this: people lie, but timelines don't, and documents never forget." She'd built a case where every piece corroborated every other piece, where the pattern was undeniable, even if individual incidents could be explained away. Financial abuse plus neglect plus medical endangerment plus deliberate hypothermia exposure equals a conclusion no investigator could ignore. December 22nd, 2 p.m. Adrienne Sinclair sat across from Vernon at his kitchen table, the same table where he and Leora had decided on outdoor punishment 48 hours earlier. Her tablet was open, recording audio with his verbal consent. "Tell me what happened on December 20th. She said, her tone professionally neutral. Vernon's story was smooth, rehearsed. "Wren was upset about the dog. Emotional. She ran out before we could stop her. Into the storm. You didn't lock the door behind her." "Why would I lock it?" His expression was perfectly calibrated confusion. "She ran off. We didn't even know she'd gone until the police called at 11. You were home all evening. Watching television? We thought she was in her room. Did you look out the window at any point?" "No reason to. Weather was terrible. We stayed inside where it was warm." Every answer consistent, every detail designed to position him as ignorant bystander to a child's impulsive flight into danger he couldn't prevent. At 2:30 p.m., Marlene took his place at the same table. Adrienne asked the same questions. She asked to step outside. Marlene said, her hands folded tightly in her lap. To cool down. It was all very calm. Adrienne's pen paused on her notepad. "But your husband said she ran off before you could stop her. Which is it?" Marlene's eyes darted toward the living room where Vernon waited. "It happened so fast. Maybe I'm misremembering. Was the door locked?" "I don't think so. Why would we lock it?" "Your husband mentioned watching television in the living room. Were you watching with him?" "Yes. No. I was in the kitchen for a while." "Did he mention seeing Wren outside?" "No, he didn't see her." They forgot about Margaret Walsh's Ring camera mounted at door height, facing the Mercers' living room window across the street. They forgot that the neighbor who'd saved my life by noticing my footprints had technology that noticed everything, recording motion-activated footage with timestamp and night vision, storing it in cloud backup that couldn't be erased or denied. Adrienne leaned forward, her expression unchanged, but her voice carrying new weight. Mrs. Mercer, I need to ask you one more time. Did your husband look out the living room window at any point between 8 and 9 p.m. on December 20th? No, Marlene said too quickly. He was watching television. He never got up. Then why is there camera footage of the curtain closing? The color drained from Marlene's face like water from a broken glass. In the living room, Vernon's shape went rigid, the kind of stillness that comes from hearing something you thought was safely buried getting exhumed in real time. Adrienne sat back, her tablet still recording, giving the silence room to expand. The neighbor who'd saved my life had also recorded my grandfather's. The timeline was documented. The lies were catalogued. And the gallows my mother built had just received its final beam. Vindication doesn't arrive. As lightning, it accumulates like evidence, one signed statement at a time, until the truth has enough weight to crush lies. The camera footage question hung in my grandparents' kitchen for exactly 4 seconds before Adrienne Sinclair thanked them for their time, and left with their contradictions recorded and catalogued. But footage alone proved the lie, not the whole crime. My mother spent the next 6 weeks building the rest. January 5th, 2023. Morrison Road Veterinary Clinic, a low brick building that smelled like antiseptic and dog treats, where Copper had received his annual checkups for 13 years before Vernon stopped bringing him. My mother sat across from Dr. Sarah Holloway, 56 veterinarian with 3 decades of experience and records that went back to Copper's puppyhood. Vernon Mercer declined recommended dialysis support in September. Dr. Holloway said, pulling up Copper's file on her computer. His exact words, too expensive for a dog that age. Can you document that the child had no caretaking responsibility? My mother asked. Dr. Holloway's expression shifted to something between professional outrage and personal disgust. A 15-year-old dog with stage 4 kidney failure requires professional intervention medication, dietary management monitoring. An 8-year-old can't prevent or cause that death. I'll sign that statement. The notarized document, 3 pages, detailed Copper's diagnosis timeline, Vernon's refusal of treatment, and explicit medical opinion that scapegoating a child for inevitable organ failure was not only false, but medically impossible. My mother added it to folder 7, the one she'd created for post-incident evidence. The original 6 folders were foundation. This new folder was the prosecution. January 18th, 2023. Ruth Webb's kitchen directly across the street from my grandparents' house, close enough to see their living room window, clearly close enough to hear shouting when windows were open in summer. Ruth was 73, retired English teacher widow, living alone with excellent hearing and a conscience that kept her up at night. I started keeping notes when I heard Vernon screaming at her in July 2021. Ruth said, sliding a spiral notebook across her kitchen table toward my mother and Adrienne Sinclair. 18 months of documentation. The notebook was organized chronologically, each entry dated and time-stamped July 14th, 2021, 7:30 p.m., shouting audible from street, words unclear, but tone abusive. October 3rd, 2021, 8:15 p.m. child, crying on front porch, went inside after 6 minutes. April 22nd, 2022, 6 p.m. door slam, child visible through window looking distressed. Adrienne turned pages, slowly photographing each entry. Then she reached December 12th, 2022. Child locked on porch, 6:45 to 7:10 p.m., temperature 38 degrees Fahrenheit, crying. Adrienne read aloud. This was 8 days before the blizzard. A pattern. My mother said quietly, that escalated until conditions were severe enough. Her voice holding the kind of cold fury that comes from watching a pattern resolve into intent. Ruth's hands twisted in her lap. I should have called sooner. I didn't think he'd actually... Her voice broke. Ruth Webb had watched for 18 months, documented everything, and still felt she'd failed because watching isn't the same as saving. She'd done more than most neighbors would kept records most people wouldn't bother creating, and it still wasn't enough to prevent what came next. But her documentation proved this December 20th wasn't aberration. It was escalation. She handed over a thumb drive containing digital copies of her security camera footage. Two files stood out December 12th, showing me on the porch in light jacket for 25 minutes, and December 20th showing the curtain moment in time-stamped motion-activated clarity. Vernon's face visible through the gap, looking directly at the camera's angle, which meant looking directly at me, then turning away. 4 seconds of premeditated abandonment recorded and undeniable. February 2nd, 2023. My mother called First Bank Trust Department with a subpoena Adrienne had helped secure, requesting all records related to my trust fund. She expected financial statements, transaction histories, guardianship paperwork. She got those, plus something she hadn't anticipated. Conrad Abbott, 47 trust officer who'd managed my fund since my father's death, had flagged an inquiry in his notes. I have a note from November 9th. Conrad said over the phone, his voice careful and professional. Vernon Mercer called asking hypothetical questions about trust access if, quote, circumstances changed regarding custody. My mother's hand tightened on her phone. 11 days before he locked her outside in a blizzard. What did you tell him? That sole custody plus court-appointed conservatorship would grant significant access to fund management. I flagged it as unusual at the time. Conrad paused. The timing is damning. What do you call it when someone researches profit margins before attempting murder premeditation? First-degree intent. The difference between manslaughter and capital crime, between accident and execution. Vernon hadn't locked me out in a moment of rage. He'd researched the financial benefit, first tested the method on December 12th, waited for conditions severe enough to ensure the outcome, then executed the plan, with his sister's coordination and his wife's complicity. That evening, my mother sat in her hotel room. She'd kept it, hadn't moved back yet, waiting for legal resolution with 3 new pieces of evidence spread before her on the desk. Dr. Holloway's statement proving the blame was manufactured. Ruth Webb's notebook proving the December 20th incident was the culmination of an 18-month pattern with December 12th as dress rehearsal. Conrad Abbott's note proving Vernon had researched trust fund access 11 days before attempting to secure sole custody through my death, disguised as tragic accident. The original 6 folders documented financial abuse and neglect. These 3 new pieces transform the case from custody dispute to something else entirely. He planned it, my mother said to the empty room, her voice steady and cold. He looked up the access rules, waited for a blizzard, and locked her out to die. She called her lawyer at 8:47 p.m. I need criminal charges filed, attempted murder. I have the timeline. The curtain moment, 4 seconds of eye contact through glass, while an 8-year-old froze and begged, wasn't impulse or negligence, or even abuse in the conventional sense. It was the final step in a scheme that started the moment Vernon learned sole custody meant money. November 9th, research. December 12th, test run. December 20th, execution. The evidence didn't just prove what happened, it proved why. The evidence took 3 months to compile and 11 minutes to destroy them. Criminal charges would come later, my mother's lawyer assured her. But first came the administrative hearing that would determine custody. April 17th, 2023. Jefferson County Department of Human Services, a conference room with fluorescent lights and a table large enough for evidence binders stacked 3 deep. I wasn't there. 8-year-olds don't attend their own custody hearings. But my mother told me later what 11 minutes of systematic presentation looks like when 3 months of documentation meets 30 years of lies. Adrienne Sinclair began at 10:03 a.m. with Ruth Webb's spiral notebook, 18 months of dated entries, documenting shouting, crying, door slams, and 2 lockout incidents, including the December 12th practice run. She moved to Dr. Holloway's veterinary statement exonerating me completely. Proving Copper's death required professional intervention, Vernon had explicitly refused. Then school counselor records 18 drawings documenting neglect through symbolism an 8-year-old couldn't fake. Bank statements showing funds transferred from my account to Vernon's. And finally, the November 9th trust inquiry 11 days before the blizzard where Vernon asked First Bank about access protocols if sole custody were granted. Each piece landed on the table with deliberate precision. Vernon's jaw tightened with each addition. Marlene stared at the wood grain like it might offer escape. November 9th, 2022. Adrienne said, her voice professionally neutral but carrying prosecutorial weight. Vernon Mercer contacted First Bank inquiring about trust access protocols if sole custody were granted. 11 days later, he locked his granddaughter outside in a blizzard. That's taken out of context. Vernon interrupted, his voice sharp. I was asking, hypothetically. Mr. Mercer, Celeste Thornton, cut-in 52 Jefferson County DHS supervisor, 27 years of experience separating children from dangerous adults. You'll have opportunity to respond. Please let Ms. Sinclair finish. The evidence continued. NOAA weather data showing -12 Celsius and 40-mile-per-hour winds. Hospital records documenting stage 2 hypothermia. My drawings with timestamps showing curtain gap figure behind glass handprints on window. Each piece corroborated every other piece, building a structure where individual coincidences became undeniable pattern. Then Adrienne turned on the conference room monitor. Ruth Webb's security camera footage, night vision mode, timestamp in the corner, December 20th, 2022, 18:22 p.m. The angle captured my grandparents' living room window across the street. For 30 seconds nothing happened, just static view of curtained window, snow falling in diagonal sheets. Then, at 8:18:22, the curtain moved. 6 inches of gap appeared. Vernon's face filled that gap, clearly visible in the camera's infrared, looking directly toward the lens, which meant looking directly at where I stood on the porch, 3 feet from the window. 4 seconds of eye contact, you could count them. 1, 2, 3, 4. Then the curtain fell closed. 20 seconds later, the living room lights went dark. The video played for 47 seconds and ended 30 years of Vernon Mercer controlling the narrative. Everything before could be disputed. He said, she said, childhood memory, parental rights. The video was objective truth, with timestamp and night vision clarity showing exactly what Vernon claimed didn't happen. The timestamp shows 8:18:22 p.m. Adrienne said as the screen froze on Vernon's face in the window gap. Core temperature at hospital admission 3 hours later was 32 degrees Celsius, severe hypothermia. The storm was loud, Vernon said, but his voice had lost its earlier sharpness, flattened into something defensive. I couldn't hear knocking. I didn't realize. The video shows you looking directly at her face pressed against the glass. Adrienne interrupted, her tone unchanged. Then you closed the curtain and turned off the lights. Marlene covered her mouth with both hands. Leora, sitting beside Vernon, went very still. Adrienne pulled up phone records next projected on the same screen where Vernon's face still lingered in freeze frame. 11 calls between Vernon and Leora between November 9th and December 19th. Then text messages. December 19th, 11:47 p.m. from Leora's number to Vernon's. Tomorrow's perfect forecast, just updated. The room's temperature seemed to drop. Tomorrow's perfect forecast, just updated. Adrienne read aloud, her voice carrying new weight. Sent December 19th, 11:47 p.m. from Leora Dalton's phone to Vernon Mercer. The National Weather Service had just upgraded the blizzard forecast to historic severity. Leora's face drained white. I was talking about the snow for Beckett to play in. Ms. Dalton. Celeste Thornton said, her tone shifting from administrative to something harder. You're being investigated as a co-conspirator. I'd recommend obtaining legal counsel. My mother sat through all of this without speaking. She didn't need to. She'd already said everything through bank statements, weather data, veterinary signatures, neighbor documentation, and 47 seconds of video. The evidence spoke with a voice louder than testimony, clearer than memory, more devastating than accusation. At 10:51 a.m., Celeste Thornton read the findings. Effective immediately, all custodial rights are revoked from Vernon and Marlene Mercer. Sole legal and physical custody is awarded to Saskia Mercer. Grandparents are restricted to supervised visitation at monitored facility, only pending completion of criminal investigation. Trust fund guardianship is transferred solely to the custodial mother. She paused, looking directly at Vernon. Embezzled funds totaling $18,400 are subject to restitution order. You can't do this, Vernon said, standing his chair scraping loud against linoleum. We're her legal guardians. We're, Adrian corrected, gathering her binders. And preliminary findings substantiate felony child neglect. The district attorney's office will be receiving our full report. Felony. The word hung in the air like a verdict before trial. This wasn't just custody loss or visitation restrictions or financial restitution. This was criminal prosecution, prison time, permanent record, the kind of consequences that don't expire when a child turns 18. The conference room doors closed behind my grandparents at 10:55 a.m. 11 minutes of presentation, 52 minutes total, including their failed rebuttals and Celeste's decree. 3 months of evidence compilation destroyed in less time than it takes to watch a sitcom. But preliminary findings, felony child neglect, meant the destruction was just beginning. Custody was civil. Criminal charges were just starting. Healing doesn't announce itself with drama, it arrives in violet curtains chosen by a 10-year-old, and mornings where snow means beauty instead of terror. The criminal charges became plea deals by August 2023, and by December I was living proof that justice doesn't always look like prison sentences. Sometimes it looks like pancakes on a Tuesday morning and the absolute certainty that the door is unlocked. December 15th, 2023, 7:30 a.m. Our apartment, mine and my mother's lease in both our names, smelled like maple syrup and coffee, and the pine candle on the kitchen counter. I stood at the stove flipping pancakes, a task she'd taught me, carefully emphasizing that hot surfaces required respect, but not fear. The kitchen window faced east, catching morning light that turned everything golden. "Can we get a tree this year?" I asked, sliding a pancake onto her plate. "A real one that smells like pine." "Absolutely," my mother said. "You pick it out." I glanced out the window at the December sky. "Weather says snow this weekend. Want to go to the park?" The casualness of that question, snow as neutral fact, weekend plans, ordinary life, was its own miracle. My mother smiled, the real smile that reached her eyes. "I'd love that." Therapy sessions had reduced from weekly to monthly by November. Dr. Ellen Grayson, 43, child psychologist specializing in trauma recovery, told my mother I was processing remarkably well. The nightmares that had been nightly in January came maybe twice a month now. Our apartment had violet curtains I'd chosen myself, brass door handles I could reach and open from inside, or out, and a desk by the window where I did homework in natural light. That afternoon, my mother sat at her home office desk reviewing the final legal documents that had arrived the week before. Vernon and Leora had accepted a plea deal in August 2023, supervised probation for 3 years, mandatory anger management community service, and a permanent restraining order barring any contact with me for the duration of my minority. No prison time, but complete erasure from my life with legal enforcement. Marlene had signed an agreement relinquishing all custodial claims in exchange for avoiding charges. The embezzled fund was being repaid in monthly installments deducted from Vernon's pension. "Permanent restraining order," my mother read aloud. "No contact, direct or indirect, for duration of minor's childhood." 9 months had passed since the April hearing. 9 months of complete silence. No letters, no calls, no attempts at contact. Maybe some people do learn, or maybe legal consequences create the boundaries conscience couldn't. The evidence binders sat in fireproof storage under my mother's desk, not forgotten, but filed under case closed rather than active threat. 6 original folders plus supplementary documentation. Ruth Webb's notebooks, Dr. Holloway's statements, security footage, phone records, plea agreements. There, if needed, archived if not. My mother had learned in insurance investigation that you keep the receipts forever, but you don't live in the filing cabinet. January 8th, 2024, 3 p.m. My mother took a video call from Conrad Abbott, the trust officer, who'd flagged Vernon's inquiry and provided evidence of premeditation. I was at school, but she told me later what financial security sounds like when it's finally ironclad. The amended trust documents are filed, Conrad said on screen. Only you can authorize access or modifications until Wren turns 25. And if anyone from the family tries to contest, my mother asked. The court orders are permanent. The trust is untouchable. She's safe. The fund remained what it had always been, my father's life insurance converted to numbers I wouldn't control for 15 more years. But the people who'd tried to steal it, who'd researched access protocols and engineered circumstances to secure guardianship, had zero power over it now. The money was safe. More importantly, I was safe. January 12th, 2024, 6:15 p.m. Gentle snow began falling outside our living room windows, the kind of soft evening snow that accumulates slowly and looks beautiful under streetlights. I was reading on the couch, my mother was finishing dinner prep, and the apartment was warm and quiet and thoroughly, completely safe. I stood and walked to the window without thinking about it, without steeling myself or counting to 3. I just walked to the window and pulled the curtains completely open. The curtain moment had haunted my mother for a year. Vernon's face in the window gap, 4 seconds of eye contact, choosing abandonment while I froze and begged. That image had appeared in her nightmares too. Now I stood at a different window in a different home and chose the opposite opening wide, letting light and snow and safety in. Mom, look how pretty the snow is, I said, pressing my palm against the glass. The glass was warm from interior heating. My hand left a print, but this time someone was watching who cared. My mother appeared in the doorway, dish towel over her shoulder, and her expression shifted into something I'd learned to recognize as relief, layered over protective love. It really is, baby. Can we make hot chocolate and watch it fall? Absolutely. She closed the evidence file archive on her desk, literal closure laptop folder marked December 2022. Incident minimized and sleeping, and joined me at the window with 2 mugs of cocoa topped with marshmallows. We stood side by side watching snow transform the park across the street into something beautiful, something that had nothing to do with hypothermia or abandonment, or the moment someone chose cruelty over care. Sometimes protecting a child means documentation and evidence and calling the right people at the right time. Sometimes it means violet curtains and pancakes and the profound, ordinary gift of watching snow fall together through wide-open windows in a home where every door unlocks from the inside and nobody ever gets left in the cold. And to you, listening to my story, remember, this silence protects the wrong people. For years, I thought staying quiet about the small things, the yelling, the control, the coldness, was easier than causing family conflict. Don't make my mistake. Document what you see. Trust your instincts when something feels wrong. And understand that protecting a child sometimes means making the call that shatters family peace. Because peace built on someone's suffering isn't peace at all. When family betrayal happens, your first instinct might be revenge. But I learned that family betrayal revenge isn't about retaliation. It's about truth. My mother didn't seek revenge against my grandfather. She sought justice through evidence documentation and the right authorities. That's the lesson: when family betrayal cuts deep, respond with clarity, not rage. I believe God put me through this experience to show others that protection comes through transparency, not silence. The evidence binders, the phone calls, the testimonies, those were acts of love disguised as paperwork. If my story resonated with you, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Have you faced something similar? What would you have done differently? And if you know someone who needs to hear this message, please share it with them. Subscribe to Family Betrayal Stories for more real accounts of resilience and justice. Thank you for staying until the very end. This story contains fictionalized elements for emotional impact and learning, but the core message that documentation and courage can save lives is absolutely real.